Aloha and welcome back, psychedelic travelers within this beautiful holographic matrix. My name is Brendon, aka Mystic Spider-Man, Skull Babylon, Wolf Shield, welcoming you to another one of our inspirational team podcasts that we do here through Paradigm Shift Central. This is our Synergy Circle. Today's topic is all about the spiritual wisdom of psychedelics. So for some of you, you've probably been waiting for this one. This is a very exciting one to be able to hold space for, to be able to have some discussion for, and we are going to get right into the discussion in the next moment. We're just going to go through a little bit of an introduction. For those of you in the YouTube chat, please feel free to drop an 1111 in the chat to be able to make sure that you guys can hear me okay as we get rolling through this quick technical thing. If you notice the audio is a little bit out of sync with the video, please apologize we apologize for that, but please forgive us. It will be synced up as we move through the broadcast. Other than that, just a quick introduction as we get ready to go into this. Again, what we're doing here, we are creating sacred digital space to be able to have consciousness expanding discussion, to be able to have conversation related to spiritual themes that we don't always get a chance to be able to talk about. So we'll get more into the details of it. And for those of you who are new for the first time, please feel free to drop a 333 in the chat and let us know if you are here for the first time. And of course, I am joined on air in this circle by fellow leading members. We are joined in by Raw Being, aka Raw. We are joined in by David, and we are also joined in by Julia. So for the fellow leading members who are here, I invite you to gently unmute your microphones and make some psychedelic noises and send some love to all the amazing people who are tuned into this broadcast. So the gnomes have learned a new way to say hooray. Anyways, Terrence McKenna. We'll probably be talking a little bit about Terrence McKenna in tonight's broadcast. So thank you again, fellow leading members, for being here. Thank you again to everyone for being here. Now is the time where if you're tuning into this live, to please feel free to invite more people to take part in tonight's discussion simply by listening, simply by being present in this space, in this circle. Again, just as a brief introduction, Paradigm Shift Central, the project that we do, this is about being able to build a global team of shifters, light guardians, people who are actively helping assist with the shift in consciousness through creativity, compassion, and personal development. And so with this is a chance for us to be able to practice having important discussions. And right now, this conversation was one that I feel is incredibly relevant, incredibly valuable, incredibly pertinent, because psychedelics are starting to really rise within the collective. There's a lot of people who are starting to talk about them, especially over the past couple months. For those of you who have kind of been on the forefront of the shift in consciousness, for those of you who maybe tune into this as a result of TikTok, again, you're probably hearing a lot of people talking about psychedelics and a lot of people who got questions about psychedelics. And so as a footnote, as we move into this podcast, as we move into this discussion, disclaimer, we are not encouraging the use of illegal substances. We are not telling you what to do. We are encouraging you to think for yourself, and we are holding space to be able to have discussion about wisdom and experience. And the fact of the matter is, part of the reason why I wanted to be able to have this, going back to what I just said, is there are a lot of people who are naturally feeling this call towards psychedelics, and that's kind of the way how it happens. And we'll kind of talk about that, like the psychedelics will like call to you, the curiosity will kind of pull you in. And so knowing that this is happening and knowing that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be tuned into this podcast who may be brand new to a lot of these discussion topics, we are here to be able to hold space as mentors and leaders to be able to help give you some insight and some inspiration. So again, if you're someone who's maybe, thinking about doing psychedelics for the first time, by you listening to this conversation, this is a chance for you to be able to invest in yourself simply by being able to be in that space. You'll get some tidbits, you'll get some wisdom, you'll get some experience, you'll get some tips and tricks, whatever it may be. But yeah, keeping in mind that there are going to be people who are going to be doing psychedelics perhaps for the first time over the course of, even the next like 5 weeks or whatever, right? So what can we do as community to be able to help assist with that? How can we kind of like supervise? How can we sort of help mentor? How can we be kind of like leaders? And I don't want to just use the term elder, others, but again, to be able to like pass on our knowledge, to be able to say, you know, even in some ways, you know, it would be like here's things that worked for me, or here's things that didn't work for me, here's mistakes that I don't want you to have to make, because we want you to be able to have the most incredible, beautiful experience and the most incredible, the healthiest relationship possible when it comes to working with these sacred tools. And that's exactly what these are. That's again part of how I see it, is that these are incredibly sacred tools. So before we get further into the conversation, what we're going to do, we're going to drop into a little bit of a meditation. This is something that we do at the beginning of each synergy circle. Right before we do that, I'll just mention it now so that way we don't have to mention it afterwards. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You guys help make this podcast possible. Again, Patreon is where you can continue to support the work that not only I do, but the community does, and also to be involved as a leading member when you join on air for these podcasts and get access to a private community space, which is created to support conscious creators and leaders. And so you can sign up on Patreon with a monthly contribution. When you join at $11 a month, you can join as a leading member. So please feel free to check out the Patreon either after this episode and just explore more and learn more about the community. And we also got a team chat so you can connect further there. And again, we do these podcasts every Thursday at 8 p.m. EST, and you can find all the past episodes through YouTube and as Paradigm Shift Radio on iTunes. So again, huge thank you to everybody for being here, and let's begin with a little bit of a meditation. And this is just going to be kind of dropping us into a collective vibration, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper down this psychedelic rabbit hole. So okay, all right, so for everybody here, just take a moment to get yourself nice and comfortable. Get a drink of water if you need it. Beautiful. All right. So for everybody here, when you're ready, just take a moment and close your eyes. Straighten up your spine, open up your chest, relax your shoulders, relax your face. And as you listen to my voice, gently just taking a moment here to connect with your breath. Soft, gentle inhales and soft, gentle exhales. And as we gently become aware of the rhythm of our breath, what we're going to do, we're just going to bring ourselves into this space of gratitude. If you want, you can put your hand on your chest, put your hand on your heart. And going back to the origins of this project, before it was podcasts online, it was literally just conversation circles in a yoga studio with me and my friends and people who felt called to join in. And so imagine in this moment, all of us just kind of sitting in a circle, sitting in community, sitting in a beautiful, cozy place, maybe imagining us in a cute little yoga studio, or imagining us outside in a field. And just take a moment here to just kind of look around at the faces in this circle and just see the people who are here, see the people who are showing up, see the people who are actively assisting with the shift in consciousness by taking part in these important discussions. And just take a moment here to look at these faces. You can see familiar faces, fellow members of the team, and you will see new faces. And just take a moment here to just express your gratitude. Just to say hello, say welcome, and to be able to receive that gratitude in return. We're just going to stay here just for a few moments. And as you're in this space, just allow yourself to speak words of kindness and compassion to those who are in the circle with us here, right now, in the future, at any point. So just take a few moments here and just breathe, and I'll just stop talking, literally just for a few moments. Just be in this moment of oneness. Go ahead. Just continuing to breathe here and just feeling that love, feeling that support of the community, feeling this bigger story that we are on. All of us continuing to show up, shifters, light guardians, dreamers within the dream, awakening together. And we'll conclude this meditation as we just carry this gratitude with us throughout this discussion. We just hold this vibration. And we just open our hearts to the sacred mirrors that we are, here to be able to help walk each other home. And so as you continue to carry this gratitude with you, keep this visualization within your mind as you listen to this podcast. And as we continue to breathe here, we'll slowly begin to bring awareness back to our physical body, keeping this gratitude with us. And when you are ready, slowly wiggle your fingers, Wiggle your toes and gently open your eyes and return your awareness to the space around you. Beautiful. All right. And so with that said, we are going to get right into this discussion. And what we're going to do, we're going to go around the circle. And again, we have myself, we have Julia, we have Rob, and we have David. And as far as I know, there may be some other leading members who are going to be joining us partway through. And so if you guys are ready in the chat, go ahead, drop a 777 in the chat, just to be able to let us know that you are here. And again, getting into this discussion, why is this discussion important? I'll just kind of recap really quickly. And really quickly, for those of you on anything other than YouTube, for TikTok and Instagram, click the link in my profile to be able to join in on YouTube. This is where you want to join in. Click the link in my profile to join in on YouTube. So, intentions behind this podcast. Psychedelics have been a part of human history forever. And within the past 200 years, they have been incredibly suppressed. And that's something that should raise some attention. You know, why? Why are they being suppressed? And we'll talk about that throughout this podcast. But I think for those of us who have had personal experience, it's incredibly obvious that these are very sacred tools, that these are sacred allies, that they are something that we can deepen a relationship with when we show up to them with respect, when we show up to them with admiration. And as I was mentioning before, there are a lot of people who are going to be tuned into this podcast, and just people who are out there in the community who are getting introduced to psychedelics perhaps for the first time. They're hearing other people talking about it. They're getting curious. They're hearing other people having their own experiences. And they're just like, whoa, you know, like that sounds really interesting. I want to do that. You know, this is fascinating to me. And they feel this pull to it, you know. And I think that's kind of the thing with psychedelics, is psychedelics, they are consciousness themselves. They are like a synchronicity portal. And so for those who kind of are open to that level of experience, the psychedelic experience will naturally kind of like call them in. And so knowing that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be feeling that call within literally the coming months, within the coming years, what can we do as a community to be able to at least have some discussions here and now, to be able to help lay some groundwork, to be able to help provide some mentorship, to be able to help provide some wisdom, especially to those of you who may be tuned in, who may be brand new to the concept, who have never done psychedelics before. And again, obviously, as I said, we want you to be able to have the best experience possible. That doesn't mean it will be the most comfortable experience possible, but the best experience possible. And that is going to be something that we'll be able to help create space for tonight, simply by having discussions, simply by having conversation. So, psychedelics. Obviously, when we're talking about psychedelics, the main ones that we're talking about psychedelic mushrooms, we're talking about LSD. Of course, you can get into other variants. You can get into ayahuasca. You can get into DMT. Those are primarily the main ones. And of course, marijuana obviously has like psychoactive properties to it. But tonight's conversation will be primarily related to those four teachers. And so just kind of sharing a little bit of my own experience. And then from there, we'll pass the talking stick. And so for whoever wants to go next, put your hand up and we'll pass it over to you next. So whoever wants to go next, just so I go. So we'll pass it to Rob next. So I'll just share real quick and then we'll pass the talking stick here. And again, reminder that as we have this discussion, this is literally just practice. It's practice for me. It's practice for the other members. It's practice for you listening as well. So for me, a bit of my own personal experience with psychedelics. I was first introduced to psychedelics when I was about 17 or 18, and that was a relatively not too long after, within the same year that like I was introduced even just to like marijuana. Like I didn't start smoking marijuana until I met my group of friends, and that was in like grade 12. And at the time, I was already kind of like going through my spiritual awakening. Like I started going through my spiritual awakening when I was about 13 or 14. And as I was kind of like maturing, even in the earlier stages, I started getting introduced to people like Terence McKenna, people like Alan Watts. And Terence McKenna is someone who very adamantly talks about mushrooms, talks about psychedelics. And this is a man who passed away in the 2000s, but in the early 90s, he spent a lot of time going around and having lectures and writing books and sharing this wisdom and this knowledge that he had gained from working with psychedelics. And so over time, again, you know, it was something that I had an idea about, but it wasn't until I actually experienced it that I was able to really be able to gain a better understanding of what it is. And that's kind of the thing with psychedelics, is that, you know, you could literally listen to this podcast and we'll probably tell you some wonderful things, but you won't really know until you do it. And that's kind of the thing, is that it's literally an experience. It's not just like watching a movie where you can just tell someone what happens. It's not like, you know, it's like this is the plot. It's a direct experience. And it's going to be very unique for you. And one of the things with psychedelics that I've kind of thought of them as is basically when you are working with psychedelics, it's like taking a magnifying glass to your subconscious. So things that are kind of underneath the surface, it can kind of like amplify them. It can kind of bring them to the surface. Psychedelics have the ability to be able to dissolve things and to be able to dissolve boundaries, to be able to dissolve illusions. And this is where it gets into the idea of, you know, like, why are psychedelics illegal? There's multiple reasons, but a big thing with psychedelics is that they really make you kind of question your life, question your narrative, question your paradigm. What narrative are you living under? Whose paradigm are you living under, so to speak? And that's where a lot of people, you know, they start kind of doing psychedelics, and they're just like, wait a second, like, why am I listening to like the government? Like, what, like how come, like, when did I agree to that they were the ones who are going to dictate my life, when I'm like a sovereign eternal being who is here to be able to experience the beauty of my own personal reality, sort of thing. And so real quick, I'll just kind of explain that over the years I've worked with mushrooms. Mushrooms were the first thing that I worked with, and then eventually I worked my way up to doing like 5 gram mushroom. I've done that once. That's actually something that I have a video of online. Incredibly beautiful experience. Eventually I didn't work with LSD for the first time until I think I was like 29, which for some it's like, whoa, like that's late, you know, because I know like there's like kids these days, and I'm literally using the term kids, like there's 15-year-old kids who are doing LSD for the first time. I'm like, whoa, like this is like a whole nother level of like awakening that's happening. The fact that, you know, people are doing LSD, and even still, you know, they might not have the full context, but when you have an experience like that, the experience will reflect the consciousness that you are at. And this is kind of interesting because like some people could literally do the same amount of mushrooms, and some people will just be like, oh yeah, you know, I giggled and I saw some trails. That was about it, you know, it was kind of fun, right? And then you get other people, and then, you know, they'll do that same amount, and they'll be like, yo, like I was like seeing the code of the matrix. I was like seeing through the veil. Like it opened me up. It connected me to another aspect of reality. And then eventually, even before that, I actually worked with DMT the first time, and that was back in 2009. And that was actually like a very powerful experience. And I'll have to tell you guys a little bit more about that. And that was like on a sunrise, that on a beach during a sunrise. It was incredibly beautiful. But I'll just explain here real quick. If I were to kind of like try to explain, you know, like what do psychedelics do? Like what's the experience like? Basically the way how I would simply explain this, and then I'll pass it to Rob, for those of you who may be trying to comprehend, you know, it's like, oh, you know, like they just make you hallucinate. But I think the term hallucinate kind of undermines what's actually happening, because over the period of doing psychedelics, what I actually began to understand is that basically we are in our default reality kind of like holds this, it holds like this perception that is filtered. Like that is our default reality right now is incredibly filtered. And you can look at the science of this, and people will say, you know, like, oh, we only see like 0.1% of the light spectrum, things like that. You know, that's kind of a scientific angle. But the way how we see this reality is incredibly filtered. And then basically when you're working with psychedelics, this filter kind of gets pulled back, and you kind of see reality almost as more of what it is. And when you see it for more of what it is, the boundaries begin to dissolve. For example, things begin to move, things begin to breathe, and it's not just a hallucination, it's almost becoming aware of the fact that you are in an ocean of energy. And one of the things, you know, if you like look at a tree and you look at the grass, if you were sober, you would look at it and be like, that's a tree, that's grass. But then when you're like on mushrooms, you look at it and it's like, oh, that's tree grass. Like it's just one thing, you know, like it's literally just kind of like this continuous thing. And then you look at yourself, and then you're like, I'm still a part of that. Like I'm a part of the tree. I'm a part of the grass. I'm a part of these bugs. Oh my God, these bugs are alive. Like what's up with that? And it kind of sparks this curiosity, right? And that's where a lot of people, when they work with mushrooms and LSD, you know, they kind of just like go out there and they start hugging trees, and they're like in the dirt, and they just feel called to it. Because when you work with it, when you're coming at it from a place that's, you know, prepared, intentional, it brings us back to the magic of the heart. It brings us back to this very powerful wisdom within inside of us, you know. And I think that is when you start getting into this idea, like, why are psychedelics here? I think they're here to help us find our way back to that, find our way back home, find our way back to that wisdom of the heart, find our way back to the idea that we are the dream awakening to itself. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But when I worked with more of the high doses of 5 gram mushrooms, it became, and even with LSD, it became incredibly obvious how this reality that we are in is very much like another version of the dream state, which is something we talked about literally last week in dream class. And that was something that was incredibly visceral. And that's where, like, literally when you kind of come up on the psychedelics and stuff like that, it's very similar to kind of becoming lucid in a dream. Like, it's a similar sensation. You're just like, whoa, like, okay, like, this is okay, like, I'm like super super aware right now. And then it's almost as if, like, that's where psychedelics have this ability to kind of like snap people out of a sleepwalk. They're just like, was I sleepwalking? Like, have I been sleepwalking for the past like 25 years of my life? You know? And then it suddenly brings them to this place, and they're just like, they're seeing things in a new way. They're seeing their family in a new way. They're seeing their friends in a new way. It opens their heart. It just kind of like brings to the forefront this deep interconnectedness. And so, long story short, that's why psychedelics are incredibly powerful. They themselves are a consciousness. They're not just like a biochemical reaction. They are a frequency that you tune into, so to speak, and they are a consciousness that you can almost communicate with, that has wisdom, that has the ability to be able to like give you the opportunity to explore more parts of yourself. The mystery is incredibly ripe. It's incredibly deep. I think we're still just scratching the surface. But ultimately, I think, again, these tools, these allies, have the ability to be able to help us understand more of what it means to be a multidimensional being. And I'll leave it at that, but obviously there's more to say, and I know I said a lot there, but drop an 1111 in the chat if that kind of just like, even for, you know, people who are new or something, if that kind of like paints a picture of, again, why this is important, because I feel that these tools are incredibly valuable for the shift in consciousness, because they take things beyond just an idea, and they take things into the realm of experience. Oh, I know things are interconnected. I know about oneness. I know about sacred geometry. I know that when I hug someone, it's another version of me. Buddha nature, you can see the universe in their eyes. That's all real. But psychedelics, they will take it to another level of visceral experience. And this is the thing. It's not like it's like, oh, like that's because you're high. Like, that's actually a part of the human experience. Like, those feelings, that is a part of the human experience. We are in this vessel because we are here, because we are meant to be able to experience those type of feelings. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Rob. And Rob, thank you so much for joining in. Rob is one of our newer leading members. So Rob, please feel free to briefly introduce yourself and go ahead, talk to us a little bit about some of the spiritual wisdom that you've gained from psychedelics, a little bit of your own experience. And then from there, we'll keep passing the talk and stick around. And thank you again, everyone, so much for being a part of this discussion here. So with that said, Rob, when you're ready, go ahead and unmute your microphone and we'll pass it over to you, dude. Thanks so much. And just getting things.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on. First of all, is the volume good? Is everything good? Are we okay? It looks like you guys kind of froze on me. Yeah, it looks like you guys froze up. Is everything good? Good. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So I really resonated with pretty much everything you said, because I do see it that way as well. And for me, it was kind of similar to your experience, where things like marijuana and other psychedelic tools weren't exposed to me until, or I should say, in the same time frame. And so, pretty much growing up, all throughout high school, I was kind of like, so I was the sober kid. I just did sports. I worked out a ton. I took care of my health, and I saw things like drugs is bad. I had this view on drugs that it was, well, a drug. Like, when you have that word, that stigma of drug attached to something like psilocybin mushrooms or LSD, we often associate drugs to bad. But when I started shifting my perspective on these drugs as more of natural tools and natural herbs, I began becoming more open to the idea of experimenting with them. And so the first time I even experimented with marijuana was when I was 18 years old. So relatively late. I don't know, maybe it's early or late, depending on who you are. But for me, I had friends that were doing it. I was always, opposed to doing that. And I'm glad I finally got to experience marijuana, because that led me into being more open to psychedelics. And that's when I think a real shift came in terms of my awareness and just peace and bliss within myself. Because prior to having experimented with psilocybin mushrooms, that was the first psychedelic tool that I did participate with. I took 3.5 grams, so I took an eighth, and I had like a first Bardo experience. So for those that are unaware of what Bardo means, there's the first Bardo, there's a second Bardo, and there are many more. I personally only experienced the first Bardo and the second Bardo. The first Bardo is where we have that sensation. We're still aware of our physical body, so we can see our hands. They go from old age to young age, or we can see the trees and the plants breathing. We have a very altered physical experience. And the second Bardo, some people refer to as the breakthrough or ego death. And you have that experience where you completely lose who you are. You lose all sense of self. And it was when I had that experience the second time I took it on 5 grams. I didn't have that experience with 3.5 grams. I had it with 5 grams. With 3.5, I just had the first Bardo experience where I was kind of walking around and everything just looked magical and it was absolutely beautiful. And so when I finally took the 5 grams is when I entered the second Bardo, and that's when my real spiritual awakening began. I started to realize that there really was more to life, body, and this physical vessel. And so at the time I was 18, 19 years old. I was a personal trainer, and everything was very kind of matrixy. I had like a set thing to do, and just my view of the physical body was just what I could see physically. I had no metaphysical knowledge of myself at all because I had no experience outside of myself. And so I intellectually understood things like astral projection, but I had never experientially understood those things until I had an outer body experience. And psychedelics kind of gave me that pathway from understanding things intellectually to understanding things experientially. And so after that breakthrough, that second Bardo experience, I kind of shifted my whole focus on my physical well-being. I had always been into fitness and everything health related, but it was very surface level. So now I implement a lot of holistic approaches, Ayurveda for those that are familiar, and it's just been absolutely beautiful. So I think going off of what you said, the reason that perhaps it is made illegal is because it does make you kind of think outside of the box in terms of what really is necessary for our survival here and what is simply being indoctrinated in us as to what's necessary. So for me, I think the best method, I should say, to experiment with psychedelics is to make sure you're in a comfortable environment, because I know that there may be some that are doing it for the first time. And my first time, I was out and about. I mean, luckily I was in nature and grass and all of that, and it was absolutely beautiful. However, I didn't have that second Bardo experience until I was able to lay down and kind of lie on my back and liberate myself temporarily from my body. And so just before I pass it on, just a really useful method is to simply lie down and just relax. You can put on music, but I think lying down and letting your body rest and not interacting so much with the physical will help you experience that second Bardo. I don't know who wants to go next.
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. Thank you, Rob, so much for getting things started there. Super appreciated, man. And again, just some of the stuff you're talking about is definitely something that I want to be able to dive in further to, and it's also like part of why I'm interested in the discussion that we're having now and how it's kind of like leading the way for the future, because that's what I feel like. It's like we're starting to get into this process where now there's a lot more people who are kind of like working with psychedelics almost in like scientific studies and scientific environments and everything like that. And I almost like wonder, like do aliens have their own psychedelics? Like, or maybe are they psychedelic all the time? But again, like what I'm interested in is this idea of basically like interdimensional, interstellar travel that is capable through the use of psychedelics and through the use of meditation and through the use of going inwards. Like we have this, and sorry, who am I passing to next? David or Julia? If you guys want to let me know. I know both of you probably want to go next. All right, Julia, I think David's saying you can go next. So, okay. So whatever works. Okay. So again, when you look at kind of like the state of the world and everything right now, we have this idea of kind of like space travel, and we have this idea of like, man's frontier is about going to the stars and going outwards and shooting giant phalluses into space, so to speak. I mean, it's almost kind of like something that's very much a reflection of kind of like some sort of like egoic archetype that we're in right now. But what happens when we understand that there is equally, if not more, space to be able to explore when we go inwards? And it's always going to be like kind of, and that's the thing, kind of like with what Rob is saying, like there are literal spaces that you can access, and this is where I'm like, I'm not an expert on this. I'm interested in being able to see, like, are there common spaces? Are there pathways that we can actually map out? Are there techniques where it's like, hey, if you do XYZ and breathe using this method and take point this and have this intention and have this mantra and set this intention, then you will be like met at the front gates of like some sort of realm by another dimensional being who will enter you into this space or something like that. And again, this is where we're literally, this is stuff that Terence McKenna was talking about, where it's like, people think that alien contact is going to happen when they like land on the front lawn. But meanwhile, alien contact, which is again more so like proto-dimensional opposed to just extraterrestrial, has been happening through the psychedelic experience. It's been happening by going inwards. And the big thing is understanding that these beings that we're encountering, they're not so foreign from us as we might believe them to be. They're actually us. They are actually us. Like we are like the ones that are lost. Like we are the ones that have kind of like wandered off. And now when we work with these psychedelics, it's kind of like they're like, especially when you get into like those DMT states, and people, they have this feeling of this immense, and the same with psychedelic LSD, this immense feeling of like home, of kind of like returning home. And then especially if you get into these other states where there's literally like other beings, and they're kind of like, they can be like that, would be like, welcome home, again. Psychedelic experiences are going to be incredibly unique for every single person that does them. Obviously, there are going to be psychedelic experiences which are going to be less than pleasant. I do not think that that is always going to be something that will happen. And I think one of the best things that we can do to be able to honor the psychedelic relationship is to be able to prepare ourselves for them as best as we can before we go into them, as a sign of respect. And even still, it's kind of like this thing, like you will get the trip you need, not just a trip that you want. So like when you kind of show up from this place of humility, and again, that can be a part of the experience where you learn to let go, there will be people that will go into a psychedelic experience, and maybe they might be doing it in retrospect at a time that maybe isn't quote unquote the best time, but they will still get a valuable lesson out of it, even if that lesson is like a swift kick in the psychic nuts, so to speak, to be like, like that's what you get. Like that's what you get when you don't really prepare for this, because this is like something super sacred. Maybe next time that you do this, do it when you're in a place where you just kind of like feel more kind of like capable of like receiving that which the universe is about to kind of like pour into you. Because it's like you work with psychedelics and it kind of like pours this gold, and you need like a cup, or you need like your hands open to be able to receive it, and you just kind of like do it, and you're just like, woo, then it's just gonna spill everywhere, and then it like angers the gods or something like that. Not to put it quite that way, but again, like I think they're incredibly powerful. And even in the midst of a great experience, you can still have times that are going to be uncomfortable. But I think the uncomfortableness is actually a part of the experience to be able to learn how to bring you back to harmony. Like you can be in the great experience, and then it only takes like one thought to kind of start kind of fractaling into something else. But then if you're aware of that thought kind of starting to fractal, instead of tripping off of it, you can kind of be like, okay, I'm going to bring myself back to my breath. And then you kind of work with it. And again, and I'll just say this, and I'll pass it to Julie, and I apologize. I know I'm so excited here. It's hard not to talk about it. I know we're all excited, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this discussion, is like, feel the excitement of us talking about this, because the excitement is real. The excitement is like, oh my God, it makes me smile. It feels like I'm on psychedelics right now just by talking about it. And I know for those of you who do this, like you get into that point where like your cheeks just hurt because you've been smiling so much. But again, I was just going to say that, again, like, the psychedelics will do a very, very powerful job of showing you knots within yourself that you need to unknot. And that kind of goes back to this metaphor when we think of ourselves as like a rope, and then over time this rope gets tangled into a bunch of knots. The psychedelic will kind of show you, be like, here's a knot that you can work on. And then if you might just need to sit with it for a little bit, and that's the thing, the psychedelics, like you'll almost try to get away from the thought, and then the psychedelics kind of like this consciousness that's kind of helping you. It's literally kind of like a mentor, an ally. It's like, no, like sit with this thought. Like, don't run away from this. Like, sit with this. And you're just like, I don't want to sit with it. Sit with this. And then you sit with it. And then, like, suddenly it kind of dissolves. And you're just like, oh, like, I released something in myself. I moved something. Energy shifted there. So again, that's where you get into this idea that the psychedelics are medicine. They are literally medicine that helps us kind of like remove emotional blockage, purge old energetic patterns. And that's especially obvious when you start getting into the ayahuasca side of things, where the physical purge of the vomiting that occurs in ayahuasca is literally a reflection of the energetic purge. And we probably all have this kind of like energetic kind of like baggage that we've kind of accumulated, and something like ayahuasca can physically purge that, but the physical purge is also the energetic purge as well. And then again, it's the mental journey of as well. Anyways, passing it over to Julia. Sorry guys, I know I'm talking there for a while, diving deep here. So if you guys are enjoying this broadcast, drop those 777s in the chat, keep sharing. For those of you on TikTok, click the link in my profile to be able to join in on YouTube, or else you won't be able to hear the other speakers. So that said, Julia, thank you so much for being here. And when you're ready, please feel free to briefly introduce yourself and go right ahead. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia. I like love everything that is being talked about right now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I start? I have so much that I want to share, and like I don't even know where to begin. But I love that, we're discussing how psychedelics can be used in like a healing kind of way. I did a lot of drugs when I was younger, and when I think it was like maybe 15 years ago that I did LSD for the first time, and that was like I was working my way up to that point, and I don't think that all the weird drugs I was doing like ever prepared me for that trip, especially because I I didn't know what to expect, and that we were also just like partying. It was also like not it wasn't meant for like a healing experience for me, but I got that kick in the spiritual nuts, I guess you would say. I totally like, oh my gosh, I had like the complete ego death, like everything just like completely, like my whole life just changed from that experience. And what I would say for people who want to have this experience, don't do it in a party situation, and make sure you're around people who love you and who you love and who you trust. That makes a huge difference in the way that things turn out and your whole experience with it. Even though I had the whole like ego dimorphic, even though I had the whole like experience of like dying, and which was so uncomfortable, um I think that my favorite like bits have been when I was like in nature and able to do art and really like play with those kinds of things and really like dive in like in a more safe environment, with people who are going to protect me instead of like laughing at me when I'm like in the fetal position crying. But yeah, I think that the one of the neatest things is like about psychedelics is that you kind of are faced with your mortality. um I think that we here on earth, we always think about, what is our existence, like what, and mortality is something that's really feared. So when I had that experience, that was life changing for me. I remember feeling like the attachment to people who I really loved. I like was like I had like this spiraling kind of vision of my dog dying, who like I was super attached to. She was my baby. Like all my tears from all my teenage like years, like all of those were like in her fur. She was like my baby, and losing her was really scary in this trip that I was on. And then I started to lose my parents, and I was like I couldn't believe it. I was just like, how is this happening? Like, how are they dying? And then, oh my gosh, like I suddenly knew that I was about to die, and everything went black, and like we were in space almost. It was so bizarre. But that was so transformative because it made me think about like my mind and my body and my soul. Like, what am I? Like, what is existence? What is reality? Because I'm still like able to think. And so that was really, I wish that I had someone there to like be with me during that time. I was really like really alone, like crying. So I think that going forward, all the other experiences that I've had with psychedelics have been really great. And So yeah, I just wanted to share that one experience because I was like thinking about psychedelics really brings up mortality in a lot of different ways, and what is real. Um, and I also wanted to share a poem that someone sent me this morning. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I kind of just want to share that if that's okay. Um, okay. I look into the mirror and see my own beauty. I see the truth of the universe revealing itself as me. I rise in the sky as the morning sun. Not to be surprised, every particle of creation is my own form. What are the Holy Spirits? My essence revealed, and the human body, the vessel of my own form. What is the ocean that encircles the world? A drop of my abundant grace. And the purest light that fills every soul, a spark of my illumination. What is the water that grants eternal life? A drop of my divine nectar. And the breath that brings the dead back to life, a puff of my breath, the breath of all life. I am light itself, reflected in the heart of everyone. I am the treasure of the divine name, the shining essence of all things. From the highest heavens to the bedrock of the earth, all is but a shadow of my splendor. If I dropped the veil covering my true essence, the world would be lost in a flash of brilliant light. And I was like, how did you like that? That poem was so beautiful. It was like that last bit was so perfect for my experience of like I lost myself. I wasn't my body anymore. I became one with everything. My dog wasn't a dog. It was like we were all together in this space of blackness and whatever. I don't know. It was just like so deep. And yeah, I just wanted to share that experience and just, promote doing art and being with nature and being surrounded by people who love you. Oh, and I remember feeling very, very cold in that first experience. And so I don't know why I got like my blanket here and I got chills when we first started talking. So I don't know what's happening, but um, make sure that your whole body is content and hydrated and warm. And music. Oh my gosh, music is so beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I think that's what I want to share right now. There's just so much to go into. But yeah, that was my experience for the first time and like going forward, how I kind of moved into using it in other ways and moving away from like other drugs that weren't so helpful in my spiritual development.
Beautiful. Thank you, Julia, so much for sharing and again just for being able to share with us a bit of that vulnerability and that experience. Because again, I'm sure just that in itself is something that I'm sure other people can kind of relate to through their own ways. So yeah, beautiful, awesome. Thank you, Julia. And again, even with what Julia was talking about, I'll just say this and I'll pass it over to David. When we're talking about like what's the purpose of psychedelics, art is one of the big purposes of psychedelics. And this is where like I think it's important for us to be able to get into this mindset, especially when we're working with psychedelics, to be able to go there as like ambassadors, to be able to go there with the intention of bringing something back, bringing something of insight, bringing something of vision, bringing something of beauty. It can be a little idea, it can be a big idea, it can be a poem, again what Julia was sharing, it can be a vision, it can be again like a visual art piece. You look at literally the wave of psychedelic artists that have emerged over the past like 15 years, notable people such as like Alex Gray and Allison Gray and all the many psychedelic artists that have emerged over these past few years. It's incredibly profound because again, it's like we're taking these like these visions of the ineffable, and yet we're crystallizing them into something that when we share them with other people, it speaks to their soul, it speaks to their heart. And again, if our journey is literally to be able to help shift consciousness, art is one of the ways we do that. Like you can't spell heart without art. And so how can the visions and the experiences of psychedelics actually inspire us as artists to be able to help bring more of that vision into the world? And that's the thing. There are going to be some people in this reality, and they will go throughout their entire lifetime and they won't do psychedelics. Now, that's not to say they won't have a psychedelic experience, because one of the things that's very notable to take to bring into reference is the idea that we are born through a psychedelic experience and we leave through a psychedelic experience. At the moment of death and at the moment of birth, DMT is released in the brain, at least to the best of our knowledge, which for me, it makes sense. And then again, the same idea that DMT is naturally released in the brain during sleep. So this is where, literally people could go through their entire lifetime and never do mushrooms or LSD or anything like that. And yet that moment when they're on their deathbed, they'll have this experience and you'll just see them, and like, if they're in a peaceful place, or they're kind of like content with their body, and you'll just see kind of like a look come over their eyes, and it's as if they're seeing something that's in the room that you don't see, but they're seeing it. And again, this is just kind of like this connection where with DMT, it has this very, very powerful capability of just kind of like opening up like this like inner psychedelic stargate, is one of the ways that I try to describe it. So again, the psychedelic experience, you literally talk to people like Terence McKenna, and he says like it's equally important to the human experience with something such as sex. It's right up there. It's a fundamental part of our human existence. Of course, I encourage people to make choices that's right for them. I encourage people to be able to check in with what paradigms they might be listening to that is kind of holding them back. And again, without us telling anyone what to do here, I think through having discussion and education, it helps distill some of the fear. Because I know there's a lot of people that would be like, oh, I'll never do psychedelics because I don't want to, like pretend I can fly and jump off a building, which is the old propaganda stuff, or I don't want my brain to bleed, all of these things, right? So again, when people are educated, then it's important to give them the opportunity to be able to make that choice for themselves. And as humans, being able to explore our own consciousness is one of our sovereign birthrights, or at least it should be, So again, when we're working with psychedelics, it is literally something that will connect you with a deeper part of your understanding of what it means to be spirit, of what it means to be soul. And that's an incredibly beautiful thing. It's an incredibly beautiful thing. And when it happens, it can greatly change the rest of your life. One psychedelic experience can change someone's life. Literally just by being able to change the way they look at things and the way they relate to things. And that's the thing with a lot of the psychedelics, and I'll just say this, and again, just as context for those who may be new to this, the majority of psychedelics, when people do them, it's not like an addictive thing. If they're an addictive person, they might develop some sort of addiction to it. That can be relative. But with most psychedelics, people will do that and just be like, wow, like I'm content with that. And then they might not do it for quite some time. And again, that's what I was saying. With me, like my routine is like maybe to do them once a year, but when I do it, it's like very, very, very intentionally. And then I do it as kind of like a celebration, as a reunion, to be able to reconnect. And then that one psychedelic experience will kind of like keep me like just kind of like I'll ride that wave throughout the year, and sometimes it won't even show me anything new, but it just kind of like reconnects me with that vigor and that inspiration and that magic and that palpableness. So again, it's in the same way, it's important for us to be able to reconnect with our friends and have discussions. And if you haven't hung out with your friends in a while, and you hang out with your friends and it's like the first time you've hung out with them in months, what does that feel like? It's like, oh, I needed that, and then you might be good for a couple of weeks. It's the same with psychedelics. You kind of go into it, you're like, oh, and then that's the thing, like, so for a lot of people, it's like they don't even know that they need it, right? So that's kind of like the interesting thing. And again, not saying you need anything, but when used with that powerful intention, it can be incredibly, incredibly transformational. All right, David, let's pass it over to you. David, aka Motivational Speaker on TikTok. Please feel free to introduce yourself, dude. Thank you so much for joining. And when you are ready, go right ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm David. Good to see everybody. Was loving this. Oh man, I love all the conscious talk about the Stargate. That's hot, because I literally was talking to my buddy about that the other day. I was like, it's the future of space travel, guys. Like, you don't understand. So I would say for me, I feel like I had what I'd call, or I mean, I guess everybody kind of has this feeling, but I had such an ideal psychedelic experience, because specifically for me, I didn't do any sort of like psychedelics until like pretty much after my spiritual awakening. So I had a pretty intense awakening experience that lasted about 8 months or so, give or take, throughout the time where I would kind of pop in and out of these like really intense samadhi states just randomly in like at the mall. And I still hadn't had a lot of context. I don't think I even knew I wouldn't have at the time described it as a spiritual awakening. I was just like, shit's getting weird. So I eventually was like having conversations with my friends and probably just giving them an ear beating about the universe or something. And my buddy is just like, bro, are you like on psychedelics? Like, are you like just doing mushrooms all the time? And I'm like, what, no, and it's really interesting because everybody has sort of mentioned the sort of bias to psychedelics. I was not aware that I had so many sort of like pre-programmed biases to those types of drugs. And it was super interesting to confront that and to be confronted by that with like having somebody else be like, hey, you kind of sound like you're doing mushrooms all the time now. Could you chill? And I was like, oh, maybe I'll try mushrooms. So that's what kind of brought me into that space. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll check this out. Because if you can't, it was a very intense period of my life. And so when I did kind of finally make my way to psychedelics, I was I don't want to say disappointed, but I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like this is what it is. It seemed very homey, partially because of that kind of natural home feeling you get, but also I would say because I was like, oh no, I've been here before. This is sort of, it was kind of a confirmation of like, oh, like I wasn't crazy. That felt like home. This feels like home. This is real. The other stuff we need to evaluate. And it really kind of sort of sandwiched me with this really warm kind of feeling that like, oh wow, this is another kind of game that we're playing now, which was really exciting. But so I guess really my first experience was just with sort of LSD. I guess it was LSD, yeah, and it was great. I mean, it was just really just kind of this bright thing. I know I got a lot of writing done. If you can tell by any of this exchange, I talk entirely too much. So there's a lot of talking usually. I'm an extrovert. I like to speak things out and kind of play with them out in space. But one thing that always happens is that it's such a wonderful teacher in that I feel like I want to be an advocate for doing any sort of personal work, like before you do any psychedelics, because I think the benefits of that, of course, they can break you open and help you in so many ways. But I think there's so many more kind of benefits that you can glean if you're in a good space when you're going into it. And for me, it was really great because I got the opportunity to approach things that I was dealing with in my personal life, from a sort of a space of neutrality. I know psychedelics do help with that, but the resistance wasn't there. So it was just, it's like, I guess I describe it as like kind of doing shadow work, but like completely just, it's like you're just kind of walking around in your shadow, like, oh yeah, that's where I'm doing this thing. I'm like, we're done with that now. Cool. Like, and the medicine would lead you in a direction, and it was like, oh, cool, yeah, that's true. Definitely gonna deal with that. And it became such a light space for me. And man, I'm really excited. Every time I do psychedelics, I still get a little like, oh no, maybe this is whatever. But yeah, it's definitely a targeted medicine that I love using now. And I can't recommend it enough to enough people. So I think that's enough for right now. I have like hella stories. I just don't want to talk too much. Or Brendon's gone.
Beautiful. No, I'm right here. I was just in another dimension. So there we go. Cool. All right. Okay. Awesome. David, thank you so much for sharing. And again, thank you everyone. As we've gone around the circle once here, I do want to be able to just inviting people in the chat to be able to share some additional insights as well. If you guys want to be able to talk about the additional ways in which psychedelics have made an impact in your life. And again, you know, like I think that's one of the interesting things, if we were to just kind of not only be able to talk about, you know, just kind of like the spiritual wisdom that we've gained from them, but like, have they made us different people? Like this is the thing that kind of makes it interesting, where it's like the synchronicity of psychedelics is almost kind of something where they are always a part of our path, whether or not we fully realize it, until we do arrive at it. And so for me, like that was always like something where kind of like similar to what you were talking about there, David, as well, where it's like you're going through your reality, you're kind of like just going through things, everything's just kind of like following through the motions. But then when you get into that psychedelic state, it's this feeling of like, I have arrived. Like as if like this moment has been waiting for me, as if like this moment already existed, and then like I arrived into it, sort of thing. And for me, like that's what I really, really felt with when I did like the 5 grams of mushroom. Like it was like, actually this is interesting, and I don't think anybody specifically talked about this. It was an overwhelming sense of deja vu. Like that was like the best way I could describe it. It was just like, this is like 100% deja vu where I am right now. So again, it's like this idea that, you know, the psychedelic experience, it's not like it's just like something that happens. It's something that is like already a part of our destiny, as if like as soul we like agree to doing psychedelics before we even incarnate within this physical incarnation. And again, and even when I did like LSD and oh man, like the DMT experience that I had was so incredibly visceral. And I'll just talk about this real quick, and then I'll pass it over to Rob, because I do want to just continue to keep the conversation flowing. And again, what we'll do here, we'll just kind of like continue to let us just kind of like chit chat about it here, and also just kind of like getting into that space where the psychedelics, again, like they have a voice in this. You know, the mushrooms are speaking through us right now. Like, what is the wisdom of the mushrooms? What is the wisdom that is kind of like coming through? How can we be an ambassador with them right now? But when I was working, well, one thing I should say is that like when you're working with psychedelics, when you're working with LSD, when you're working with mushrooms, when you're working with DMT, it's kind of interesting. And I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Like, are these, you know, completely different ballparks, or are they like different doors to the same place? Like, are they different paths to get us to the same place? Because one of the things is that like, even with when you're working with things through like the open-eyed visuals, with DMT, in retrospect, even though I hadn't done LSD at the time, or hadn't done like a 5 gram mushroom trip at the time, in retrospect, doing DMT almost like instantly takes you to like the peak of a 5 gram mushroom experience, like right there. Like you are there. It's like a rocket ship. It just kind of like takes you right to there. So again, you know, like with this idea that like all of these tools are opening up receptors, are opening up signals, are opening up it's kind of like this idea where, okay, this is one way and again, we're literally trying to explain something that is almost beyond words. But one of the things I was going to say is this idea that through psychedelics, one of the things I've learned is that we are literally in an ocean of energy. And within this ocean of energy, there's different frequencies. And these frequencies are modes of perception. And so when we're with psychedelics, it's like we kind of like tune our frequency, and we're still in the same place. We're still interacting with the same energy, but we're just perceiving it in a way that we weren't previously able to. It's kind of, again, like kind of like turning a dial on a radio signal. And that's kind of the thing with psychedelics, that for me, it's kind of like this idea that like what you're seeing has always been there. Like what you're experiencing right now, it's not like it's literally just you hallucinating. There's parts of your brain kind of piecing things together, but it's literally you seeing this like constant ocean of energy that is always there. And that for me, especially when I did DMT, was so vivid, was so incredibly obvious, where basically what I saw when I did DMT, and I'll just chat here because if Rob's back in a minute, we'll pass it to Rob. Otherwise, we'll pass it to whoever. Yeah, okay, we'll pass it to Rob. Where what I literally, when I had DMT and I explained it afterwards to people, it was literally like this idea that, you know, I said I could see the code of the matrix. Like that was the analogy that I used in reference to the idea of like that scene in the Matrix when Neo actually, in the first one, Neo dies and then he like kind of like comes back, and then he's in that mode where he can see all the code and he sees the agents and stuff like that. When I was working with DMT that first time, and keep in mind this was in 2009, I was only 21 at the time, but I was asking for it. Like I had the intention. I was like, yo, okay, if it's ready, it will find me. And synchronicity brought it to me, right? Like I didn't have to like go on the black market or anything. Like synchronicity brought DMT to me, and the universe is like, here, like this is for you. Like everything is aligning. This is your moment. This is your experience. This is what you have chosen for yourself. And when I did DMT, it was this incredibly visceral experience where what I could see was literally what I refer to as a code of the matrix, but what it was, and AKA what this reality was literally like golden sacred geometry infinitely unfolding upon itself. Like that was literally the best way I could try to explain it into words. And it was so visceral and it was so real. And one of the things that really just brought it home with me was the idea of, again, understanding that like this was so familiar. Like this was actually something that was like a aha. It was as David was saying, you know, it was a returning home feeling. And it was incredibly obvious that this reality that we are in was literally pure light, was literally just like infinitely unfolding light, and I was a part of that. And it was incredibly obvious that I was this like being of light. And so again, when we think about the bigger story of the shift in consciousness, it's literally this idea that we go through this process of intentionally incarnating here into this reality with amnesia so that we can go through the journey of remembering. And when we work with psychedelics, it really brings us back to this process of remembering. And when you understand why things don't look like that all the time, it's because if they did, it would be incredibly obvious that we are spiritual beings having this human experience, or we are beings of light having this human experience. And it would kind of take away a bit of the narrative. It would take away a bit of the journey. That plus it would be very challenging to be able to do regular things like, you know, like operating, like cooking and driving cars and, you know, like doing remedial tasks and things like that. Like these states, as natural as they are, again, it's like the human vessel has been orchestrated where it's created its own psychedelic experience that we refer to as normal that allows us to operate like that. And that's a big part of the lesson, is like this reality as we experience it normally, quote unquote, is a psychedelic experience in itself. But since it's so common, we just don't think of it that way, even though it very much is. And if you want to be able to experience this without the use of like LSD mushrooms or DMT, one of the simple ways you can do this is, and again, this is kind of, you know, encouraging people to be able to practice this, is through breath work, is through meditation. If you want to do this, one of the simplest ways that you can do this, anybody could do this. You could go do this tomorrow. Go into the woods, go into the forest, or go anywhere. And ideally into the forest where you can kind of like sink into the biorhythm of the trees. That helps, things to anchor you in. And basically what you can do is you can pick a spot and eye gaze on it. So pick a leaf or pick like a tree and just eye gaze on it, and then try not to blink, soften your vision, keep your gaze in one spot, and continue to breathe and just stay in that spot. And what you will actually notice is that when you are still, when you're in that place of stillness, the illusion of reality that we perceive as normal begins to dissolve, and you will actually begin to see a natural psychedelic vision. Suddenly the trees around you won't be able to kind of like see it as like, oh, one tree, one tree, one tree. It will just kind of look like tree. Like it will just be like an ocean of tree, so to speak. So again, like that's kind of the thing, is that when you're in these meditative states, you can actually begin to kind of naturally pull back the veil. But the way how the biology of this human vehicle works is that as soon as we move, as soon as we get up and stand up and bring movement to our body, it's kind of like it magnetizes us back to this normal psychedelic vision. So that's where it's like you might be in this psychedelic state, you might be looking at something, you might be eye gazing, be it with a tree or even with yourself in the mirror. That's another thing to do. And then as soon as you like get up and look around, like everything will go back to normal. But if you stay still and get good at staying still, you can actually observe these natural psychedelic states. And so again, kind of what the psychedelics are doing is basically bringing to the surface this natural psychedelic state, but when you get up and move, it stays and you can continue to exist within it. Rob, I saw you nodding along with that, but yeah, I'll just pass it over to you at this point. Again, this is just like popcorn style. Whatever you guys feel you want to be able to add to the conversation. Again, wisdom. And again, keeping in mind that there are people listening to this who are younger, who are learning just by listening. So any additional insight, guidance, tips that you feel appropriate to share, go for it. Rob, when you're ready, passing it over to you, and go right ahead, dude.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. Like, I resonate with all of you so much with all of this. I guess I kind of wanted to expand on when you mentioned if these psychedelics or different methods of reaching quote unquote like an enlightened state or a meditative state are like different experiences, or if they're all leading to that same space. And I do think that they're just different paths leading to that same space of awareness, because I noticed my psilocybin mushroom experiences were very similar to my LSD experiences. Now, I've never experimented with dimethyltryptamine, DMT, but I absolutely would love to. Like, I'm not opposed to that at all. But from the experiences that I've listened to, they're very similar. Like you mentioned, having like a peak 5-gram psilocybin mushroom experience, DMT kind of shoots you right to that space and awareness right away. So I just want to kind of touch on that. But Julia, you mentioned how you get chills and things like that. And I'm actually getting chills right now too, because, and you can let me know if it resonates with you. Yeah. So like, I've noticed, especially after having my realized awakening, I feel like it's very touchy to talk about like an enlightening experience, because then automatically people are like, oh, this guy thinks he's like enlightened or something. When I started realizing that I was on my spiritual path, I started realizing that I would get goosebumps when things would resonate with me extremely profoundly, like to the point where it's vibrating my pineal. Like I'm sitting here and like just straight vibrating. And I noticed that I get chills and goosebumps every time I hear someone speak some sort of truth. So I think, yeah, goosebumps and chills are a really good indicator to know if something is truly like a truth through your like own experience. So yeah, I just think I kind of wanted to go into how psychedelics actually helped me, because I didn't really necessarily go into that. In high school, like I mentioned, I did sports and all of that. And I was really physically active, but I did have a temper. I had a really, I shouldn't say a really bad temper to the point where I had like anger management, but it was borderline. I'm going to admit it was borderline. So it affected my relationships and everything like that. And after having been exposed to marijuana, that's what kind of chilled me down. And I started realizing, oh, like I'm not having these like moments where I'm extremely angry for no reason, like forgetting my car keys, getting angry type of thing. So I was like, okay, maybe these like natural herbs actually have some potential healing qualities to them. Let me see what else is there. And that's when I started experimenting more with psychedelics. And you mentioned, Julia, how you had like the idea of mortality. The first time when I took the 5 grams, that was a reoccurring theme all the time. I would go from being in my body to thinking, okay, I'm dying. I'm about to die. Like I'm about to leave. And so I go in and I leave my body and I'm like, okay, wait, I thought I was about to die. Like that felt like DMT was shooting through me. I thought I was about to die. But I'm fine. Like everything's okay. Like I'm in the corner of the room, examining the room, having an outer body experience. Everything's going backwards. People around me are speaking backwards. And so, so I started to realize, okay, maybe my perception of death is what's stopping me from achieving whatever it is that I want to achieve, this fear of death. And so I started to really get comfortable with feeling that fear of death and just getting really comfortable with that. And as soon as I started to tap into that kind of space, I started going through all of my friends' lives, like all of my close friends. I saw from birth to death. It was very rapid. It was like a timeline or a reel that was going super fast, and it was going from one person to another person. And I saw them as an extension of me. And so finally, when my trip ended, I returned back to my body and I thought to myself, oh my God, now I have to go through that cycle of life. At the time, it was like a big hit. Like when I came back to my body, it was a huge like oh wow, like I was just in a state of bliss where literally everything, like there was no emotion, no fear, nothing. I was just extremely blissful. And now I'm here and I have to try to achieve that state, naturally. Or that was the message that was coming to me. And like throughout the whole thing, I have these meditation practices that I learned through the Isha Foundation. For those of you that know, Sadhguru has um, a foundation that he's organized, and so a lot of my practices in yoga I learned through him. And so I kept being told, make sure you stay consistent with those practices because that will get you there. There's no one obviously telling me that, but it was something that when I came to my body, I realized that that's what I had to do. And so over time, I began to read about different forms of, I guess, spiritual teachings. So astrology being one of them, alchemy, reading about like the alchemical marriage and the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and how it's like a blueprint using the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the monad, the dyad, making sure that those are perfectly in line so that you can have that enlightening experience through the 7 major operations of alchemy. And so I started reading through all of these different teachings, and I realized astrology is all pointing to the same space of awareness or to that same experience through a different way. It's the language of the stars. So a lot of the times, I know, especially when you're newer to like spiritual teachings, and you have those people around you that aren't really vibing with that, they might say it's like all hocus pocus. But to me, what really helped me, because I know there's a lot, it gets very discouraging when you've been with them your whole life or partially your whole life. It doesn't matter. You have people around you you love, and you see something as a truth, and they don't. So it's very difficult to kind of stick with your path, your spiritual path. And psychedelics really helped me stay on that path, And so I began seeing looking at the stars as a language. So just like we don't believe in the language of English, we know it. Just so too the stars. We don't believe in the stars. We know the language of the stars. And so all of this was literally as a result of me experimenting with psychedelics. And so everyone has their own path of how they dive into different fields of knowledge. And I think that psychedelics not only helped me with like my anger issues, it literally helped me with staying committed, dedicated to myself, looking at myself as a temple, and just having that outer body experience. My perspective on my physical vessel just completely got, I mean, it's an ego death. It completely got rearranged. Like everything that I thought was it wasn't. And the more I began being comfortable with that, the more I realized I was at peace. And so the more comfort I had with things like dying and things that sound like very like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. The more I got comfortable with that, I realized the more peaceful I became. And so, yeah, I just think psychedelics, like David said, you have to make sure you're in a certain space of just a certain space of just making sure that you're in a good environment, making sure that you're mentally prepared, because you will get a lesson, whether it's the one you intended or not. You get the one you need. So I think it's really important that we make sure we're focusing on ourselves soberly, doing our meditative practices, things like that, to make sure that we're in proper alignment, to make sure that we have proper downloads when it comes to taking these natural medicines. So before I hand it off, I wanted to kind of elaborate or go into more depth on, Brendon, you said how we develop or we have a burst of DMT during fetus development. And I was actually not too long ago reading about this because I think I mentioned to you, I was working on a lecture on elementalism. And so part of that lecture involved DMT and how on the 49th day of fetus development, we actually have a burst of DMT. And that's when our pineal gland becomes biologically functional. So meaning it can operate, meaning it can perceive things. And so it becomes an antenna to the soul. When the soul inhabits that pineal, we start experiencing things on a soul level. The soul observes these perceptions, and it also is connected to source. So another cool thing that I came across was UV light from the sun. When we interact with UV light, specifically UVB rays, we actually, when it enters our cornea, it sends light encoded messages to the pineal. And so I started looking more into that, and how when someone has a lack of sunlight, because I mean I'm very into health, so So I just love everything about the human physical body. And so I was reading about how light actually interacts with our body. And so I was reading about how you have a certain experience due to light. And so when you have light entering your eyes, interacting with the pineal, it activates certain receptors or certain glands to produce hormones, things like that. So there's an interaction between light and the physical vessel, and the soul, operating and managing all of these perceptual senses. And so I kind of put two and two together and thought, okay, a lot of people are asking how to get in touch with their intuition and how to, tap into and download information. And so when you listen to the soul, that is intuition. And when you have a lack of light, you have a lack of interaction with the soul. So you're operating from strictly a perceptual sense, like a physical touch or an emotional sense. You have no information or downloads from the soul due to lack of sunlight. So that's kind of really off topic, but I really wanted to kind of dive into that, how DMT is really just an amazing thing that naturally can produce. And there are a lot of different methods to kind of spurt DMT throughout us. Breathing is one of them. Obviously, taking dimethyltryptamine or smoking dimethyltryptamine is another. Drinking ayahuasca. So I think that's just, to me, psychedelics should be used as a tool to experience things, kind of as I don't want to say a shortcut, but it is sort of a shortcut to the meditative practice and meditative works. Obviously, doing it sober is the best way to do it, because you don't become reliant on certain things. But psychedelics should always be used with the intention, like David said, to make sure that you're in the right space to receive those certain downloads. So I just kind of wanted to expand on that. I don't know who wants to go up next, Julia, David, maybe Brendon.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Rob, for reiterating those points. And yeah, again, like we'll just kind of take a moment here to just go over some super simple basics in terms of some tips and tricks, or just like general ideas, again, for those of you who are perhaps new to this, and even for those of you in the chat, like if you wanted to be able to like mention something that you would recommend for people who may be new to psychedelics, what would you tell them? And again, as David was already saying, intention being one of them. We have already talked about this. Setting being very important. Doing your education ahead of time, being able to make sure, if you can, that you have someone who's already familiar with the psychedelics, who might be able to hold space for you, someone who could be like a trip sitter, or just someone who's already done it, who can be with you, can be like a bit of a guide. As Julia was saying, even being able to have music and art nearby, things that are tangible, being able to have things that you're comfortable with, even like food, snacks, like little nuts, little berries, eating fruit while on psychedelics is an incredibly sacred experience. Fruit juice, just like chugging some juice. Like I remember like just like, oh my goodness, like the first time when me and my buddies like did mushrooms, and then like literally just like we had this like nectar juice, and it like tasted like it was like the blood of God or something like that. I don't know. It was like, I was like, this is so delicious. And like, does it always taste like this? Like, have I been missing out? Like, have I been sleepwalking this whole time? But yeah, again, those are some simple things, and even just planning things out ahead of time, figuring out the time duration. Again, don't do things if you feel like you're being pressured into it. Really be patient with things. If you feel like it's a little bit of a rush, then maybe just wait to that moment when it really feels like it's right, and the universe is kind of giving you signs and things are kind of in alignment. Planning it so that, again, like you're not driving anywhere right after, making sure that you're not going to be reliant on someone else just in case things like don't go the way you plan. Being able to kind of like, if you're doing it like earlier in the day, or again, just being able to be aware of the fact that if like, don't necessarily always do it too late at night unless you plan on staying up all night. And then again, even just taking like the next day to be able to have a day to be able to integrate, to be able to reintegrate. Because after you do psychedelics for like the next like 24 hours, you're kind of going to be like a little alien. Like you're kind of going to be like this little like creature that's just going to be like, reintegrating their way back into society sometimes. Like I remember and obviously a huge shout out. Look, we got Lacey here. Lacey's here. So we're gonna pass over to Lacey as well in the next moment, because Lacey, is that cool, Lacey? You have some things to share?
Sure.
Cool. Lacey's got some things that she can share as well. But I remember when I did my 5-gram mushroom experience, like I literally and what I also want to be able to do, you know, like let's get into a little bit of like story time with like psychedelics and stuff like that, because it's always fascinating, you know. And again, you know, there's the stories that we experience when we're kind of like focusing on the external, but then there's also the stories that we experience when we focus on the internal. A lot of people, it's interesting because they will do psychedelics and they will literally go through an entire psychedelic experience and barely close their eyes or barely intentionally meditate. You know, like I don't think I really did that the first few times that I did psychedelics. I don't think I actually stopped down and be like, okay, I'm going to meditate right now. But when you meditate on psychedelics, I really experienced this when I was on LSD, where it was basically, if you've ever seen videos on YouTube where it's like a 3D Mandelbrot hollow fractal universe where you're kind of like flying through infinity and there's like these like landscapes that are shifting. It was that. Like I was there, like I was in that space, and the thing that was beautiful is that it was actually like changing as a result of my thoughts. Like I was like creating landscapes and structures and cities, and like I was like an architect, and it was literally responding to my thought. And that's one of the powerful lessons that you get out of psychedelics, is that you realize that your thoughts are the conductor, your focus is the director. So when you become aware of that, that's where it's very powerful to be able to feel, you know, if you're starting to lose a little bit of control, or if it feels like you're losing control, one of the things that you can do is bring it back to your breath. And when you're at your breath, then you can get more control over your focus, and then you can redirect the direction that you're going into. But yeah, like being in that meditative space on LSD was so visceral. And again, it was literally just like, I was in it. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a computer graphic video that I've seen on the internet. And obviously it's because other people have had these experiences and they kind of relay it. But it really opened me up to this idea that there's like these inner worlds within us that we can experience. That was part of it. Another thing I just want to mention real quick, I've had friends, some of the most powerful stories that I hear are people who go through ayahuasca ceremonies, and they literally just have super visceral experiences where they're talking about, you know, talking to like deities and gods and archetypes. And one interesting thing was literally a friend explained their ayahuasca experience as basically being like a 6-hour long lucid dream. But within this lucid dream state, they are also able to basically travel through time. And this is kind of what Rob was saying, you know, where you kind of had like this almost like this screen in front of you where you could like see your life, and not even your life, but other people's lives. And that's one of the things that he was talking about with the ayahuasca, is literally he like had a complete retrospection of his life. And he also got to see how other people felt during those experiences. So that's where, like, you know, if there was a time where maybe he did something and it hurt a friend, the vision, and this is where it's really interesting, because it's like with the ayahuasca, you're partly in control. You're in control of how you respond, but it's almost as if there's like a conductor or a facilitator. And this is like the spirit of the ayahuasca. And it's like, come, my child, let us show you this vision, and it will guide you through things. And it's really weird. I'm just kind of thinking of this. It's almost like the Christmas story with like the 3 ghosts, you know, and it's like the ghosts of future, past, and present or whatever. And it kind of like takes them on these visions, and it's like, oh, this is, you know, little Timmy's family or whatever. It's kind of like that. And you get this like deep empathetic perspective on things, and you'll see, and you'll actually feel maybe the you know, the anger that you might have expressed at someone else. You'll actually feel it. And because of this, you'll actually get the chance to be able to learn from it. And you'll be like, oh, whoa, I never realized I did that. Or oh my God, maybe, you know, maybe I haven't really been as fully appreciative as my friends and my family. And then it will change the way you kind of like come out of it, and it will give you this very transformational journey. But what I was just going to say originally, and then I'll pass it over, was I just remember kind of when I was just saying about the importance of kind of making time to be able to reintegrate. When I did 5 grams of mushrooms, it was literally at a festival. And again, this video exists. This video is online for my Patreon supporters. And there's a 3-hour version for my Patreon supporters as well. And I was looking back, I'm like, oh man, like the fact that I documented that, like that's like taking a camera. it was like taking a camera to like another dimension. I was, the fact that I documented this was like, just like, I'm like, wow, like when I left like the festival, I'm like, this is like, I felt like I was carrying this precious cargo. Like I have to get this back. I have to upload this. Like the world has to see this, right? And it turned out to be really beautiful. But long story short, with that experience, I was at a transformational festival here in Canada that I'd been to multiple times before. And then literally for that trip, I literally just like went out to a field and I just stayed there by myself for pretty much the duration of my trip for the first like 4 or 5 hours. There's another funny story from that I'll share a little bit later. But after I came back from that, it's just kind of this funny image where like as I came back from that, because it was like such a powerful journey, I was just like walking with a walking stick and I just had my hoodie on and I was just like moving very slowly but like very like happily, and I just felt like from the outside I just felt like I was like this little like Yoda creature where I was just kind of like walking around and just kind of like, and then I would be like standing there at a fireplace and I'd just kind of be like looking with this smile on and just be like, and it just like I just felt like I was like this little alien type thing, but it was a really funny and a real experience, because I wasn't me like putting on a character. Just like, no, this is what my body wants to do right now, just walk around like a little Yoda with my walking stick and my hoodie. But anyways, let me just check, because I know you guys obviously got more to share. Are you guys, can we pass it over to Lacey next, if you guys cool with that? That's cool. Okay, cool, sweet. Lacey, would you like to go next to share? Okay, so Lacey, maybe just move in a little bit and just be able to, and you can briefly introduce yourself, Lacey, just since it's the first time you've jumped in for this discussion. And
sorry, I'm just joining.
No problem. And please feel free, and again, you know, spiritual wisdom of psychedelics. So please feel free to be able to share some spiritual wisdom you've gained from psychedelics, any personal experiences, and you can obviously split it up and we'll come back to it a little bit later.
There's a lot that I could talk about. So I guess I'll just start where my journey began. Is that okay? I know everyone did that.
Do that. Yeah.
Okay. So just with like spirituality in general, I've always been a really spiritual person since I was a little kid. Never really connected with, I guess, my family's ideas of spirit and God and the universe. So always kind of took my own path when it came to that, exploring philosophy and a lot of science, like quantum mechanics, nature, reality, all that, without psychedelics. This is like early when I was like 14. I used to smoke weed back then. I think I was 12 or 13. I started dabbling in which weed is a psychedelic. So I started with that. And then eventually, I guess, psychedelics found me when I was 16. At that time, I was any 16-year-old, still spiritual, but also like naive to the power of psychedelics, and kind of just went along with my friends and was just like, yeah, let's have fun, like whatever, and not fully prepared for the kind of things that I would download, because I wasn't looking for it. It definitely found me. So by the time I was 18, I started to dabble pretty heavily with psychedelics. I did them quite regularly, and that's kind of when I experienced full ego death, which everyone talks about, rewriting my whole identity, realizing that I had lived like my whole life wearing a mask, that I, was trying to fit in, that I really wasn't living up to my fullest potential or my highest self. And so that led onto my journey of treating psychedelics as a sacred tool to, I guess, better me, to make me a better person, to keep trying to grow and be better. So that was like the first beginning. I get anxious talking on this. Sorry guys, I'm not used to this. And so yeah, like the first real wake up call, I guess I would say, where I like was given, I downloaded, I don't know, from some ancestral plane, that's all I can call it, an angelic place where they gave me the tool to see reality in a completely new way and to see myself as this multidimensional being who was not limited to her physical body, that I was more than just my body, that I was able to go to the far reaches of space and time and all that stuff, mostly in dream time, but in meditation and stuff like that as well, trance work and stuff. But yeah, so I kept using psychedelics, and then I realized that I had definitely reached a point where I needed to go on without them, that it was time for me to integrate as much as I could from what I learned, and keep leveling up in the human form and not just the spiritual form, because a lot of the time I felt back then I kind of would get lost in this higher dimensional space and forget that I'm also a human, and that I'm here experiencing the human experience, and that's also quite sacred. So yeah, but I have a lot of stories of incredible things that I saw, and I felt deep love like I cannot fully explain, and just obviously the stuff that I saw is like hard to put into words. But I've written out a lot of the stuff that I experience. I do trip reports, I guess. I have tons of journals. I was in the dream class. When was that, like 2 weeks ago?
Last week. Oh.
I'm an avid dreamer, have been since I was a little kid. So I always document the stuff that I see and experience. So I'll let other people talk because I don't want to talk too much, but I can share some more like psychedelic experiences, and also just how to, yeah, I think you guys covered most of it though, like intention, like having a sitter present, or, you know, there's just so much that can make a trip go sideways. Not necessarily that that's bad, but especially if you're new to it, it's nice to feel supported even if it doesn't go well. So having someone there is always really important. And yeah, I don't know, I could go on and on about it, but
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Lacey, for jumping in and sharing your thoughts. And yeah, and Lacey and I have had plenty of conversations about some of the psychedelic stories, about like the one of like the monkey gods up in the sky and stuff like that. Like that
was a really good one where I downloaded like some really beautiful, I don't know how it came to me, but I was in a lake, and I was swimming in a lake, and it was LSD, and I was peaking on LSD, and I was up in like northern Canada, Quebec wilderness, and I'm just in this lake. I'm like, whoa. And I'm just like seeing fractals just like coming off of everything. I'm seeing angelic faces in the trees, like morphing, like Mayan, like Egyptian, like code, like on everything. And like, and that's when I like laid back and like I was floating, and then I looked up and there's these monkey gods, and they're just like, hey, yeah, like they were just vibing with me, and I was vibing with them. I was like, thank you. And they were just pouring so much love into like me, and then all this love was just like, I'm like, what am I learning from this? And then I realized this like message came to me, and I wrote this down like the next day, because I couldn't write English obviously at the time, but I wrote it down the next day, and the message that came to me was, deep down everyone feels like they're alone, but we're here to remember that we're not. And that was like the lesson was like, we're all connected. Even when we feel alone, we're not. And I was just like weeping, obviously. It was just so beautiful, and I felt a deeper awareness kind of. And this was far after my first trip, right? This came probably 5 years later. I keep thinking that I'm like, oh, I've plateaued, I've reached this place, but there's just so much more. So that was a really, really beautiful moment. It went on. There was lots more to learn in that night, but yeah, that was a good one. Sorry, I rambled on, but
no, like honestly, like just being able to like listen to the story time of psychedelics is like fascinating in itself, and so I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah,
Lacey, again, and again, I know there are stories, and yeah, the things we've talked about of I'll leave it up to you in terms of what you feel comfortable sharing, and honestly, there's people here who who I talk to in the community, and they're like, oh, I'd love to be there tonight, but I'm not able to. So we might be doing a part 2. This may be like a 2-part discussion, because I think, you know, other people want to be able to get in and practice being able to talk about some of the conversations here. And for any of the leading members, if you guys want to jump in, again, we'll probably stay on air for here, not for too much later. So maybe I would say like within this hour, we'll get things all wrapped up. But if there are some other leading members, you guys know how to join on air. So if you've been listening to this and you feel inspired, please feel free to let me know. So who am I passing it to next? Just give me a heads up, and I'll do that in a moment. Pass it over to David. Yeah. And so one of the things that I'll just say real quick, again, from my personal experience with psychedelics that I've really kind of enjoyed, for me, my best experiences have been when I would like prepare for them weeks in advance, like literally like have that foresight and to really even like change my diet, even to cultivate my sexual energy and stuff like that. Like honestly, for the males and stuff like that, it's gonna do you a favor if you, again, kind of like don't spill your cup leading up to the experience and everything like that. That way, so you've got like the full vital energy ready to be able to sit with during the experience. But for me, being able to kind of like prepare for these experiences and even waiting to do them after periods in my life where maybe there was like a big project that I had to finish or something like that, and then to be able to kind of arrive into this space as celebration and just kind of be like, yes, like you've accomplished all those like kind of like physical tasks that you had before you did this, you did your taxes, like even like remedial stuff, right? Like you helped out with like building a deck, you did the gardening, you helped your parents move some stuff, or again, you did a big art project or something like that. If you can kind of make sure that you've got a bunch of loops closed to the best of your ability, opposed to a bunch of things that are going to kind of be like half finished, or maybe there's like a you know, like an argument that you had earlier in the day that you're kind of like still pondering about or something like that. If you can really do your best to be able to kind of like resolve those things, because again, you know, what you receive, like what you experience in the DMT or not in a psychedelic experience is what you bring with you into it. So if you can, and again, we were literally talking about this in relation to dreams as well, right? So if you can kind of, you know, like arrive with an empty cup, then the universe will fill it with something that is like incredibly valuable. But if you show up to that experience with a full cup, then it's hard to be able to receive that new knowledge, and then you'll end up just kind of like pondering with the things that are. Did you want to say something? Was that?
I don't want to interrupt, but
well, but anyways, yeah. Long story short, for me, all of my psychedelic experiences have been positive. They have all been incredibly rewarding. They have all been incredibly magical. They have all been incredibly heart opening. Not to say there haven't been difficult times within them. Those have been a part of the learning experience. But yeah, for me, I enjoy being able to show up in that psychedelic experience, and even especially when it's if it's at festivals and already being in that like physical outfit, like that's another thing. Like dress up when you do psychedelics, dress like a wizard, dress like your higher self, dress like your activated light guardian, your avatar. And then when I'm in this space, again, you know, like even like Lacey and I, like are we allowed to talk about that?
Sure.
Well, we've done like acid together at one of these festivals, and honestly, like to be able to like walk around this festival and like to be like literally like feeling like a badass Jedi and like spinning our lightsabers.
We totally spin lightsabers.
We're like walking around with lightsabers, right? And we're just
everyone
like feeling.
Thought that I was a Sith, and I was cool with that though. Like I was like, this is my shadow self. This is like I'm vibing tonight. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
definitely an alter ego, because I'm not like that at all.
It was really, and you had like you almost look like you're like from the Fire Nation and stuff like that. You're like
you look like a Sith, and I was like,
yeah,
I'm feeling that.
Right, and then like and then again, and then I had like my purple lightsaber, so she had the red one, we had the purple one, and again, like we're both kind of like these like gray Jedis, right? In addition, so like there's like a Sith and Jedi in both of us, and then like literally just the fun that we're having and just seeing and seeing. The vibes were immaculate. And it was immaculate, and seeing other people reflect that, where they would see us and be like, you guys look so badass, like you guys are so cool, and just kind of hearing their words as kind of like admiration from the universe. And I think to be able to be in that space where like you literally feel like you're in just like this bath of love, and the universe is just like, you are so loved, you are so special, you are so seen. Yeah, go ahead. Keep.
You just ended it on that. Specifically for me, I have difficulty being seen. I'm quite shy. So that specific night when we went out and like I don't know, when I'm in that higher state of like psychedelics or whatever, it could even just be you're experiencing like a holy moment. I feel like I'm really able to be seen, and it helps me transform more of how I like show up, if that makes sense. So like how I can handle this, I guess. So that night specifically, I just remember being like, whoa, people are like, I don't know, like this is kind of weird for me. I don't really like attention. But it wasn't so much about attention as we were like both receiving like this like connection and this love, and it was a mutual thing, and it wasn't, you know, does that make sense? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna receive this, and it's gonna help me see myself a little bit more. So
yeah and that's where like like even for, and this is the thing again, you know, like what can we do with when we're on psychedelics? And sorry, I know we're chatting here for a bit, and we'll pass it over to sorry, is it David we're passing it to next? But yeah, again, you know, like even for me, like when I do psychedelics, it kind of like it's kind of similar, because like, you know, when you smoke weed and you're just kind of like if you've been kind of like working on task and everything like that, and then you smoke weed, and it kind of like it almost kind of like gives you a chance to kind of step back. And you're just gonna be like, oh yeah, that's who I am. Like that's you know, that's the bigger picture. With like LSD and stuff like that, it really gives you a chance to step back and kind of be in that space. And that's where with me, like I kind of do it to be able to tap into kind of like who I am as like a bigger cosmic soul, where it's kind of like in that space, even if I don't fully know like my past lives and everything like that, in that moment, I'm just kind of like, I am a fucking cosmic badass right now. Like I feel that. Like this isn't me just like making this up as a story. It's me stepping into a story, but the story is there for me to step into, and for me to openly do it. And for me to like really just be in this place where I'm just like even for me every now and then, you know, like if I'm on psychedelics and just be able to reflect and be like, you know, like, whoa, and even just look at my life and to be able to like celebrate within my own mind, be like, whoa, like Brendon, you've done so much, like you've like helped all these people, you've done all this stuff. And I encourage that for each of us, you know, to be able to get into that space where it's like, oh my God, like I am so loved, I am so seen, I have been making a difference, I've been a part of a story that's bigger than my own, you know. So like when we're in that psychedelic space, kind of gives us a chance to connect with our story beyond the linear concept of time. Yeah, go for it.
And sorry, I'm like raising my hand.
Okay, we're gonna pass it,
And with that, like if anyone's listening and they're new to it, because I know that you said there's going to be some people that have never done it, you will come up to roadblocks, and you will come up to limiting beliefs and old patterns and maybe toxic behavior that you see well up inside yourself. But you will notice that you actually are quite separate from it, and like it really helps you like heal those type of patterns and change them and rewire your brain. Maybe how you normally did stuff before starts to transform, because as beautiful as it is being like, holy shit, like I made it, I'm here, we really, really do need to do the work before in order to get there. So don't be hard on yourself if you find that you're in a place where you're like, oh, I keep coming up to these insecurities and I keep finding these walls that I don't know how to get break. Well, you're doing the work, and that's the work. So you know what I mean? It's all the journey. So that's my, don't be hard on yourself if you're not like, holy shit, wow. Like
totally. Yeah.
You'll
like
get there.
Yeah.
Everyone gets there in their own time.
Yeah, absolutely. and again, you know, like that's where you get into the idea where it's just like when you're with psychedelics, it's great to be able to engage with your surroundings and your environment, but don't forget to just kind of like sit with the shadow, to sit with the stillness, and to see what arises. You know, you could even do that. You could even like, and this is kind of interesting because it's very parallel to dreams, where you can kind of like develop a conversation between yourself and the psychedelics. You can be like, you know, like, show me what I need to see. You know, like, what do I need to work on right now? Like, where do I need to be able to send more love? Where is there healing that might be able to take place? And if you sit with that, you know, then like the knowledge can kind of like arise from that. But again, this is where we're starting to get into the future of clinical studies related to you know, treatment for psychedelic use for helping treat with like anxiety and depression and PTSD, where it's literally rewiring the brain. And you know, shout out to Heather, shout out to our friend Heather Hargraves. I actually invited her onto the podcast, and she would have joined, but she's literally doing another podcast. She's been like a huge advocate of just like the medicinal, you know, benefits of being able to work with psychedelics and therapeutic trials, and it's happening, you know, like, whereas again, like, these things, they're not just like fun and games, like, these are actual like tools and medicines that we can use to be able to help heal people and collectively help heal the planet. And you know, like, I'm sure you've all thought this, and again, and we'll just say this and pass it to David, but it's like,
Sure, yeah.
wouldn't the world be a better place if politicians had to do psychedelics before they got elected? Like, wouldn't, like, shouldn't that almost be like a prerequisite, you know? And you look back at some cultures, and that was actually a thing, right? Like, there was probably not a single person in the entire culture that didn't do a psychedelic experience, because it was actually part of the initiation into adulthood, you know? Like, there are some cultures where they literally, like, the children are doing psychedelics when they're like 12, 13 years old, as they're starting to come into that age of maturity, because again, you know, that they have such a respect for it within their culture. This is like a lot of stuff, like, you know, in like South America, this still happens, right, and in tribes and everything like that. So we can learn from that. And again, you know, I think there's literally a psychedelic resurgence that is happening right now, and I think, like, it's happening again just through these conversations, through these discussions. So again, I appreciate everybody just being able to hold space for you know, like, the powerful tools and medicine that these things are, and again, just being able to ask that question of how they can continue to help us in the future. Pass over to David. Is that Lacey? Anything else? Yeah, thumbs up.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, guys, thank you so much for your patience. Quick reminder for anybody here on the podcast: if you enjoy just listening to them, be sure to check the show notes afterwards in YouTube to be able to follow them on all their social media platforms. And thank you again, everyone, for rocking it. David, jumping right in when you're ready. Go right ahead, dude.
So I guess I'll be the first one here to talk about like a really uncomfortable psychedelic experience. So I just, you know, long story short, I thought it would be a good idea to do it wasn't even a large dose, but a dose of mushrooms on the 4th of July. And I was actually at the beach, and, you know, wasn't a great group, wasn't a great setting. And then also I'm like an empath, like a proper wide open weirdo empath. So I'm out here, my like energy centers are just wide open, blown open. And I'm in like Los Angeles in the beach scene. And it's just like, if you've never been here for the 4th of July, it's literally just masses of people in the streets and on the beaches. And like, you know, at the end of the night, you can't get an Uber because there are just so many people like outside. And so I'm just, you know, wide open, not in a good space where I can just kind of sequester. So I'm taking in all these energies and just feeling absolutely rotten just the whole time. It was really, really interesting. Finally got home and got to a space, and me and my partner, we kind of, you know, settled in there. But for a bit there, it was really touch and go. So I cannot recommend more. I think the lesson for a lesson for me there was just the hubris of it. I had so many pretty, I'd say, intense psychedelic experiences. I was like, I'll be all right. Like, it's not that much. Like, I'll be fine. Like, and just the kind of, I guess, disrespecting the medicine. And it was a eye opener, and sort of an interesting rude awakening for me. And I was really grateful to it, obviously, at the end of it. But just then I was like, okay, this isn't a toy. Like, they were like, we're not here to play with you. Like, chill. Also, I guess this is also this is another just story, but a great, I think, lesson that I also got. I at one point was sort of experimenting with microdosing. And if you know anything about microdosing, what they tried, most people advocate you want to do it once every like 4 days, like you do it one day, the next day you usually, it's still kind of in your system. You take the next day off, so that's the 3rd day, and then the 4th day you can dose again. And a little bit, I was very aware that like a little bit of my addictive personality that I had in the past was coming up. And so also to give the story a bit more context, when I first began to have my spiritual awakening, one of the first things I got very curious about was health and how health manifests. And I know a lot of people do. It's just, you know, I got into my food, what kind of food I was eating, you know, plant-based, and changing my water. And I know a lot of people do those things. But I got really interested in health, specifically also the mental aspects of health. And I would say relatively quickly, I developed, I guess, what I would call a talent for health, and manifesting health. It became sort of this second nature thing to me that I essentially, I had allergies that I've had my entire life disappear. I was like allergic to things. I was allergic to my cat. Like we had a cat for a while, and it was just like I was so allergic. That allergy disappeared. Just eating different types of food, just the whole thing. And that wasn't just that. It was like also seasonal allergies. It was just headache. I didn't get a headache. I stopped getting headaches, which was the weirdest thing for me. But I was in such a state of health that it became such a natural thing for me. Like, of course I'm healthy. I'm just healthy all the time. And so back to the microdosing. Because of that addictive personality, a thing that happened was I was like, all right, I'll sneak in a dose here, a dose there. And because your energy system opens up like that, you are unable, it inhibits, you need time to recharge every time. Like it's not something that you can just consistently just go, oh, it's like if you think of that as a faucet, it's like you're turning the faucet wide open as big as it can go. And it needs time to slowly close back up. And if you're just hitting it and hitting it and hitting it, your energetic system doesn't have time to re-up. So literally with a course of 5-year span, I was not sick, no coughing, no sneeze, nothing for like 5 years, except for the 2 times I decided to like cheat on a double up on a microdosing. And they were separated by years. One was LSD and one was mushrooms. But both times I was like, oh, I'm going to cheat the system. I'm going to just grab this other extra microdose or whatever it was. And completely unconsciously, both times I got like the most deathly like flu that I've ever experienced in my life. Which was the first time it happened. I was like, maybe it was because I was doing this. And then the second time it happened, I was like, it was definitely because I was doing this. Clearly we didn't learn our lesson the first time. You're welcome. I was like, damn, all right, bet. But it was such a powerful moment for me because I was like, oh, dude, okay, this is not a toy. Once again, this is medicine, and I encourage you, to take it, not to, I guess, take it seriously, but take it seriously. And I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was just a non-psychedelic experience, or a sober psychedelic experience that I had. Something I think Brendon even hinted to. Everybody actually has. To this feeling of love and interconnectedness. It's so interesting when people try to describe this feeling because it's so beyond words. But one time during this particular experience, a way that I was kind of perceiving it was, I was at a mall and it just kind of happened. It came on. I was just sitting in this mall and I could see like the chains of like sort of cause and effect for every single person that was there and like their entire lives. It felt like kind of the ayahuasca thing you were talking about, where it was just any place I placed my attention, I could see past, present, and future. And it was such a calm and interconnectedness between it, because it was such a dissipation of separation between me and these people, me and anybody that was in this massive mall, and such a feeling of home. Like this is more right than anything that I've ever experienced. And I just wanted to share that because it really felt like I could see, each single person's sort of little string of their entire life. And it got very Sherlock Holmesy. Like I was like, this guy's about to trip. They're having a fight. Like it got very, really interesting, where I could sort of perceive coincidence. And that was a lot of fun. I've since had other psychedelic experiences incredibly similar, if not the same, to that. And I would just say, man, I guess for me, this particular time, it was just respect the medicine, dude. Respect the whole thing. Respect the process. And just know that like it's working for you. Like it's going in your direction. I did want to share one more thing. Just a quick perspective. One thing was that for me, because I do kind of identify as like a weirdo, a claircognizant, big, massive downloads. And one of the ways that I perceive psychedelics for me is that my normal sort of everyday consciousness is constant. If you would say it feels like a constant stream of downloads just going through me constantly all day, every day. And a thing like that I really do, probably what led to both of those times where I was like, I'm gonna get the psychedelic trip a little extra for the microdose. It feels like it's a very Adderall effect to me. It gives me the space to look at the streams of consciousness that I'm constantly getting and sort of pick through them or stay on them or leave them as I will, instead of just constantly being hit and having to, obviously breath work and do other things, but just feel sometimes just shutting it down and being like, I can't do this. I've got to do whatever it is else that I'm doing. And for me, a lot of the time psychedelics will have this sort of Adderall effect where I can just, it slows down the shenanigans and gives me the space to deal with and to make, I guess, these downloads more useful a lot of the time. And I know that's just one perspective, but I just, it's a really helpful one for me. So that's it.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for sharing, and you're getting a lot of love in the chat there. People appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and that's exactly what we are here to do. So without further ado, we'll just keep passing the talk and stick around. And I know there's is it Julia or Rob Julia wants to go next? Yeah. Okay, cool. So again, we're about in the last like half hour of the discussion. So let's work on getting as much in as we can, and anything we don't, we'll save it for another time. And that's the idea, right? Like, for every person out there, there's a unique psychedelic experience, so to speak. So thank you again, everyone, for helping bring the wisdom. All right, Julia, with that said, passing it over to you. And when you are ready, go right ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the monkey gods. That made me laugh so hard. I was like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And the fractals, I did, oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to talk about. And I'm so glad there's a part 2, because this goes so deep. And like, I'm so thankful that Rob brought up like his anger and how that he was able to work through that, because that's so real. Like, we have the ability to really step back and see things with like this super awareness. And so yeah, I'm just like, oh, I'm so psyched about this conversation. So thank you everybody for sharing. And I think that what really spoke to me was the closing the eyes and like taking opportunity to do that, because I think that was one of the things that I was able to do to really like get some like really good stuff. And it was so funny that Lacey was like, I was trying to write and I couldn't even write like English, because it's so true. Like, you're drawing something, you're like, oh, this makes sense, and then later you come back to it. But it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much that I wanted to like try to remember. But some of the stuff that I remembered when I actually took the time to like close my eyes and like not be like super like, oh, this is moving and we're all, to like sit down and really close my eyes and think about like what's going on and meditate on it. This like spiraling fractal of my like life, like my patterns. And so this kept coming up, and I'm going to try my best to explain this, but like my experience of like life and everything that I'm doing is kind of like a spiral, and I'm getting to like here, the middle, and everything is taking me there. Like, this is my like soul mission. I'm trying to like do this thing, but all these things that like anger and all sorts of different kinds of things pop up, and they kind of drag me along and make this spiral bigger. And so being on a psychedelic like experience allows you to see what's bringing you like longer, like what's making this spiral and fractal bigger than it has to be. Like, how can you bring it back in towards the center so you can get like a direct line, like this is where you need to be. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but like that's like what happened. And this like super awareness of like how I was interacting with people in the world. And then I was able to see like the matrix basically of like money and like the corruption and everything, and how that is like, if we are attracted to that and following that and kind of pleasing other people, and I'm going to look this way to please people, and I'm going to act this way to please people, that's bringing you like, whew, you're not going to get like to the middle where our soul purpose and our higher self is, and where we can really like get onto that path. So that was like something that I wanted to share really fast. And also, oh, the music thing. I've listened to music with words, and for some reason that kind of freaks me out. I don't know if anybody else has that I was laughing. Like, yeah, I don't know why, but I kind of like prefer music that is more like no lyrics, no voices. That's more like easy for me and happy for me. So yeah, yeah, this
Music.
All right, I think Lacey wants to add to that real quick.
Yeah, just about music specifically. And yeah, like music and art has always been a big part of my psychedelic trips. I always have like art, like I guess she said that, right? Like watercolors, paintings. It's a really cool way to actually download some of the visual stuff that you might see. So obviously you see that with visionary art all over the world now. But music, it's interesting that you say like more instrumental, because for me, I actually sometimes would put on a full album. So pick some like favorite album of mine, or even one that I haven't heard before, and put it on. And the synchronicities and like the messages that would like honestly come through music would be like, so for me, I'm just saying that like open your, like anyone potentially listen to like a psychedelic album. I'm telling you, it's like like one artist, for example, which you wouldn't think is psychedelic, is Radiohead. And I actually remember being, this is years and years ago when I was like 18, 19, and I watched like a music video. It was like near the end of my trip, and I thought I was coming down, but I smoked like a big fat blunt or whatever. And so of course I was like, whoa, okay, I'm back in this space. And I put some music on just to kind of try to mellow out, and I put Radiohead on, and it blew my like whole perception of Radiohead. Like, whoa, like they're really woke, deep emotional, like beautiful stuff. So like all forms of art, like instrumental, you know, albums that maybe you want to re-listen to or never heard, give it a go. It's like, even I've watched Baraka, well, High on Acid once, which was like, right?
Right.
Yeah, direct source. You're like, whoa, like I'm now traveling the whole planet. Like I'm seeing everything, like I'm full.
Yeah. Oh
Pretty
man.
amazing.
I'm just imagining like people in the future like integrating psychedelic experiences with like technology, where it's like,
Man.
you know, like
Yeah.
put on like VR and do psychedelics, and then like
Whoa.
what is going on, man?
Like that's already so psychedelic. You got like
it's-
microdose VR. I don't know if any of you guys tried
Oh
microdose
yeah,
VR.
true.
But we went, like, we have this VR place just like downtown in our city, and we've gone there, and they like showed it, like just put it on randomly for us, and I was like, you can make like fractals with
Inside VR, it's
with
like
music, and like
yeah.
you're in it, like if you, I don't know how you'd integrate that with acid or like drugs in
Just
general, but
do
you don't
acid
need
and
to,
do
but
VR. Yeah, you don't need to. But yeah, again, you know, I think just like being outside in nature is plenty, you know, like so much. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
and we'll just say this, and Rob, I assume I'll pass it to you next if that's cool. Yeah, and you know, again, with some of the wisdom from psychedelics that I've had from my own experience is just like, and I'm sure you guys can reiterate this if you've kind of like been out and walked around and stuff like that, is like it amplifies synchronicity or something like that, you know, like you'll be walking around and like you'll happen to run into people and stuff, like, oh man, now I want to go like randonauting on acid or something like that. Please don't do that. I am not advocating that by any means. But I just remember like one time when me and my friends were on mushrooms, and this was like literally the first time, and there was just like a group of us, and we were on mushrooms, and we were just kind of like hanging out in the field, and then we ran into another group of kids also on mushrooms, and it was just kind of like the universe just kind of like brought us together, and it was just really like synchronistic. But again, you know, that's just kind of a very very kind of like novel, trivial thing. But again, I think it's the deeper synchronicities that are really gonna move your heart or something like that, or you know, you'll be like, because again, and this is the thing, and this is part of the spiritual wisdom, and maybe, you know, Rob or anybody else here will have something to say on this, because when we're working with the psychedelics, it's not like we're just doing it as a form of fascination. It's not like we're just doing it just to be entertained. We're doing it to commune with spirit. We're doing to be able to connect with like other parts of ourselves, the bigger us, And this is the thing, like when you're in these spaces, you literally have the ability to kind of be able to connect with your quote unquote guides, or to be able to connect with spirits. Some people will literally be able to, like, you know, on psychedelics, like they'll see the spirits around them, you know, like they'll literally like be in the same space as them. And again, and through meditation, you can do meditation, and you could like kind of like open yourself up to being able to connect with these other, again, like benevolent sources of knowledge that you could literally kind of be able to, like, again, download information from, or be able to receive information from. Because again, when we're working with psychedelics, they're for our growth, but I think it's something where our growth is a collective growth. So like when we're doing it, we're like ambassadors for the collective of the human consciousness. Therefore, what can we bring back with us? What can we be able to you know, return with from this journey? So yeah, I would say that's always kind of like an important thing to just kind of be able to keep in mind, is that don't just go into a psychedelic experience just to be entertained, quote unquote, but you're literally going into it as if it's a journey, as if it's work, as if it's like a mission that you are on, because it is like you are going somewhere. You are literally going somewhere. So yeah, and it's quite the commitment. Rob, if you're ready, we'll pass it over to you. And when you're ready, dude, go ahead and jump right in.
Amazing. Okay, can you guys hear me okay if I don't hold this? Is all good? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I kind of wanted to touch on what you guys were speaking about when you said, you know, you're trying to write down, it's like not English. Like for me, it was kind of the same thing, but it was with like drawing. I wasn't able to draw. So the way I normally experiment with psychedelics is I always, first of all, set the intention. I feel like that's literally the most important thing to do, is set an intention to either learn something, feel something, just set an intention, even if that intention is just to be open to receive. And so I always set an intention. I have a notebook next to me whenever I do it, just in case I come back to my body and I'm able to write something down. But every time I come back, it's like I come back and I'm like, oh God, like I can't even, like this body feels crazy right now. So I have it drawn right now. I don't know where the original drawing is, but I redrew it. I came back to my body after receiving a download, and the only thing I could draw was something like this. So I had like it was on psilocybin mushrooms, and so I had a mushroom in the middle. It was worse than this. I'm telling you, this is a really good depiction of that. Like it was really bad. It was a mushroom in the middle, and then it had like a cycle here, and then one arrow this way. And so the download that I was receiving at the time was that psychedelics used as a tool will only get you as far as as far as you're receptive to download that certain information. So wherever you are on your spiritual path, and you take that psychedelic, you'll learn that lesson of that, I guess, where you are in that space and time. And so what kept coming in my head was that yeah, psychedelics are great tools, but in order to liberate yourself, you need to liberate yourself completely from everything. And that includes psychedelics. So psychedelics give you like that insight, but to completely liberate yourself, you have to be liberated from everything, literally sober. So that was like a good wake up call for me to like continue my spiritual practices, my meditations, my yoga, all of that. And I'll just share one quick story. I actually started a series on Instagram called Astral Adventures, where I kind of go over my astral projection stories and my experiences on psychedelics in the astral. And so, you know, like we mentioned before, it's really hard to put into words and symbols, because I mean, words are just literally a bunch of symbols put together to explain a certain thing as best as possible through that definite. We're trying to explain the indefinite through the definite, so it's very difficult, and we can only, you know, put patterns in front of people to help certain experience as best as we can. So the series was kind of meant as like a visual representation, but it'll never do the experience justice. As you guys know, it'll help with intellectually understanding it, like the sixth chakra, third eye chakra, like intellectually understanding things. But to experientially understand something is reaching that crown chakra, or that unity or embodiment of that certain energy. And so one of the experiences that I did have was so I'm laying on my back. Always, when I begin my experiences laying on my back with my arms crossed. And it's a method that I know Osiris has the crook and the flail, and he's laying like this, and that's Osiris is the brother to Isis, and so I just thought to myself, okay, well, I'll just embody that asana or that position and see what kind of downloads I get. And I'm very drawn towards like anything that has to do with like Kemet or ancient Egypt. Like I have like a really strong connection to there, and I've gotten readings done on me before saying that I've lived in those certain times, and so I can totally see that. And I've had certain visions of me like working on the pyramids. I don't know if it was the Giza, but I was there. I was working on the pyramids, and so it just really resonates with me. So anything to do with Egypt, and if anyone listening right now has some interesting things to share, just shoot me a DM on Insta, and we can kind of engage in a conversation like that. But one of the stories I had was, okay, so I was laying down, I began the involution process, I started leaving my body. I set the intention to just be open and receptive to learning anything that it was. This was sort of towards the beginning of me experimenting with those tools. And so I realized that, okay, I got insane downloads when I was just chill. Like I didn't really interact with this physical body much. I just kind of set the intention to leave my body and go from there. And I leave my body and I'm greeted by this deity. It's actually the same deity that I had. Actually, no, it was a different deity, but I've come across multiple that have similar energies, like archangels, and but they offer different lessons. So from what I've gathered, it could have been Archangel Michael. I'm not sure. It was the energy of that. It wasn't necessarily in a physical form. It was an orb of light. And so first it was darkness. I couldn't really see anything. I was meant to be human, but I didn't remember that I was Rob. I I was just kind of existing. And this deity comes along and is speaking to me. It's not in words because started off what I was being told was that it was a first dimension. He guided me to the second dimension and then to the third. And on the third dimension, I was here. You know, I was on like this matrix, the 3D plane, the center of the torus field, however people want to look at it. And I'm looking around and I can't move my body because I'm in a body form now. I'm in a three-dimensional physical vessel. And I'm looking around and I see him. He's dressed in a robe. He's dressed in a purple robe. And he has there's like a hood over him and his face is dark. So I can't really see if he's talking or if he's telepathically speaking to me, because in other projections and other astral adventures, I guess I was being spoken to telepathically. It was never word. We were speaking not like this, how we're interacting now. It was very, very different. And so he was telling me, he said, take a good look around. This is the third dimensional experience. And I look in front of me and there's a screen. Think about like the pilot of an airplane. You have like a really wide curved screen. And behind the screen were a bunch of gnomes. They were dressed multiple colors. Most of them were yellow, and they had levers in front of them, and they were switching these levers. And on the screen, based off of what they were switching, was a certain experience. And he was saying these are the entities or the energies that are controlling your the way you operate physically in this third dimension. Based off of your intention, they set a certain gear in place or a certain lever in place and make you have a certain experience. So I'm looking at the screen, and before I can even process anything, boom, I get shot up into like the fourth and fifth, and we go all the way up to the seventh. That's as far as I got taken. And the seventh was like, just, I mean, again, it's like beyond words. It's just blissful. Like you guys know, it's just a place of just complete liberation where you have no thing. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I came back to my body and I thought, oh my God, like why isn't this more, like why isn't everyone doing this? Like why is it illegal? Why are there so many regulations on it? Everything was going through my head. And again, this was like when I first was experimenting with that. It was like probably the third or fourth time I said, a high dose. After I took the eighth, every time after the eighth was fun. I do them very often. I'm pretty much sober like 90% of the year, and then I'll do everything in like increments. So I'll take a psychedelic, and then maybe I'll experiment with healing with marijuana for like a week, and then I'll just stop. I have no attachment. When I first started smoking, I'm sure maybe many of you can relate. You know, you have that, like, not necessarily addiction, but you have that dependency where it's like, oh, this is cool, but it would be cool if I was, you know, high too. But eventually I got detached from that because of this. I literally was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm reaching these states and leveling myself up soberly, so that when I do experiment with those medicines and those herbs, I can receive the download properly. And so yeah, I just came back, and I was thinking like, oh my God, like, everything is like, what else are they hiding? And then the rabbit hole goes deep from there. Like, we don't even have to go into that now, but yeah, I got into some really deep things that just kept opening up my pineal, and just everything I was learning was like, this makes so much sense, and connecting dots. And it was like, okay, I would connect dots, and then I would set an intention out of those dots that I connected, look at it through a psychedelic perspective. And so I would take the psychedelic, and then I would observe whatever it was that I needed to, and then take notes, whatever, that soberly, and try to implement those patterns that I learned or that I observed through the psychedelics in my sober life. And then that's how I used psychedelics to kind of level myself up. And so it's like, I think intention is everything. Intention, some people will just take it just for, like you said, just to become fascinated by it on their own. I just think it's very beneficial to also try to implement learning from it, because they do have a lot of knowledge. Like you said, they've been around for a while, and so they too. Whoops. Let's see if I'm going. Okay, cool. So they too have knowledge and information of themselves, and just like how we interact with food, we eat a banana, it becomes a part of us, it helps us grow. That's no different than fungi, a mushroom, a magic mushroom. It has certain properties that interact with our physical vessel and give us a certain experience based off of what it's made up of. So I just think, yeah, like we just kind of talked about pretty much throughout this whole thing, I think intention setting is a huge thing. And also, don't replace psychedelics for your own practices. It doesn't have to be like meditation, yoga, whatever your meditation is, because I always say, like, meditation isn't really a thing, it's whatever makes you become meditative. So a lot of people become meditative when they go on walks, when they draw, when they sing, whatever it is, whatever makes you meditative, that's your meditation. And so I think psychedelics should be used as a way to observe those certain practices, but it should never replace those things. And yeah, so I just wanted to kind of end on that. And yeah, I'm excited for part 2, because I have a lot of stories, and also stories that I'll make into my astral adventure series. So again, thank you again for all of this.
Awesome. Rob, thank you so much. Very enjoyable just being able to listen to the fascinating story from that, and again, just being able to like imagine just hearing it and just being like, okay, like I'm seeing this and everything like that, and that's beautiful. And again, I think as we get closer to wrapping this up, and we'll pass it to David. I think Julia might have had to have left off, so we'll pass it to David, and then any closing notes, and even if there is one more thing that you want to say, Rob, before we do that, that's fine. But I think just kind of moving towards the end of the broadcast, I think you brought up some great points here, Rob, where again, you know, what happens when we bring that intention to be able to show up to psychedelics almost from the archetype of a student, and to really be able to be there with the intention to be able to learn, and to understand how that learning process works. And that's kind of really, really powerful. The fact that just listening to you, where you've actually developed like a system, you've actually developed like a pattern and a routine that works for you to be able to like reintegrate it. And I think that's, again, you know, like something that I again, you know, it won't necessarily be the full conversation here, but I definitely encourage people to continue the conversation of being able to learn how to be able to integrate this knowledge. Because again, I think when a lot of people go through these experiences, especially when they don't have mentorship and guidance, they might go through a psychedelic experience, and then it's like the day later and they're just like, I don't know what to do with this. Like I literally just don't know what to do with this information. And then they just kind of, you know, like it will be there for the next few days, and then they kind of get sucked back into the matrix, and then they just kind of forget about it. And then a week later, and they're just like, was that a dream? Like, did that really happen? You know, and then they almost kind of like convince themselves that it wasn't as important, even though in that moment they're like, oh my God, this is the most incredibly important moment of my life, sort of thing. So I think it's really powerful just to be able to understand that, again, you know, the psychedelics in themselves are teachers. And so what happens when we intentionally show up as the students, and what can they continue to teach us? Lacey, go ahead. You had your...
Yeah, just like specifically with like, I don't know, like when you're first, if you don't have a mentor, like I didn't have a mentor when I started doing psychedelics. This is back in 2006, like 2007. And I definitely didn't know how to integrate anything that I was learning. It was like, who do I talk to? What did I just experience? This was like holy, like this was like next level. But I find that people will fall away, not in a bad way. It's just that like sometimes you kind of, your soul is going this, and you'll naturally, people will be like attracted to you, and I don't know, you'll find the right people. The people will find you, and you can have these discussions as we are right now. So yeah, so just like open your heart up to the possibility of like being able to talk about it. It's not, and now, I mean, it's crazy like how far psychedelics have come since even then. I'm like, whoa, like we went to this one group meetup. It was like a psychedelic gathering in our city, and like we both been psychonauts for like 12 plus years, and I was just like, whoa, like who's gonna be there? Like it was so cool. People of all different levels, like people just new to it, and just such an inviting, welcoming environment for people to learn more and also feel supported in their journey. And because we're all students, right? So yeah, I'm rambling.
That's great. Yeah. And again, just with what Lacey's saying, again, you know, just reiterating this idea that I think one of the most important things we can do to be able to integrate these experiences is simply to talk about them. You know, so like after someone goes through it, to be able to have that community, to be able to like come back, be like, tell us, like, what did you experience? Like, I don't care if it doesn't make sense to you yet. Talk about it. What was your experience? Get it out there, share it with someone, give them the opportunity to be able to reflect on it. And this is where, again, you know, fortunately we are at this point where psychedelics are kind of in this gray space, but they're moving towards, again, you know, a lot more like cities and states and things like that. They're starting to lean towards the legalization of psychedelics and everything. And again, we kind of hit upon this at the beginning. It's like, why? Like, why are psychedelics illegal? Again, I think on one level, it's literally this idea that they are something that will lead us back to our cosmic sovereignty. And that cosmic sovereignty in itself eventually becomes a threat to the dominion of those who are in control, those who are quote unquote in control, those who kind of reign from that position of power, such as like government and institutions and media and everything like that, because they benefit when you are a mindless drone consumer, right? And so the last thing they want you to do is to start thinking of yourself, to become more sovereign, to start eating healthier, to understand your interconnectedness with the land, to be able to understand, you know, like how you're like actually like a multidimensional being, just compassion for other beings and things like that. So you can start to understand like that in itself is part of the reason why they actually are, again, like illegal. But again, as we kind of move into this state of, you know, like the 5D ascension, the new earth, all these kind of like ideas and energies, I think it's going to be incredibly important for us to be able to keep holding space for these discussions as more and more people are continuing to awaken to these experiences. And that was something where I was literally like, you know, even thinking about this even 7 years ago, where I'm just like, oh my goodness, like there are more people having psychedelic experiences like right now on Earth than any time throughout history. Like the amount of people who are collectively having mushroom experiences and LSD and DMT and things like that, like this is incredibly exciting. And what can we do as community, digital and physical, to be able to help hold space for this? And again, to be able to help hold space for the discussions and the wisdom that comes out of it. So yeah, again, I just think this is so incredibly exciting for me, because this for me is like, this is like the future right now, you know. This is leading us towards like, you know, the awakening of our collective society, of our collective civilization, so to speak. So yeah, just thanking everyone so much again for being here. David, I'll pass it over to you, and let's get into some closing thoughts, and then we'll finish it off with a little bit of a meditation, and yeah, having a good time here. So David, when you're ready, go right ahead, dude.
I really appreciated what you said about just having an opportunity to sort of to ground this stuff. I think just holding space, I think having conversations like this are so crucial to giving people insight into that, into psychedelics. And a thing that I just was thinking was that it feels very much like, you know, the 60s, 70s, like the seal sort of cracked. But now we get to stand like kind of on those people's shoulders and take all this information that became probably challenging for a lot of them to ground, and make it, you know, useful, and transmute that energy into something that everybody can appreciate, that everybody can use, that can heal a lot of people. And I don't know, when you were talking about people having experiences with the medicine, and then kind of going back into their shell, going back into the matrix, I vividly remembered meeting a lot of people who I knew did drugs all the time, who I knew did psychedelics all the time, and being so turned off because at that point I felt like I was in I felt pretty great, and to kind of sort of miss energetically a lot of the times with those people really turned me off to psychedelics for a bit. I was really judgmental of the whole thing. I did eventually kind of release this, but I think what really it lets me know is that I really do kind of have a strong desire for, you know, not even just the psychedelic stuff or the spiritual stuff, but this entire awakening to be sort of tangible and tactile without getting too like authoritarian about it, but very to kind of ground this energy in reality, and to create real change. And I think psychedelics is a wonderful tool for this, and I'm really excited to see what we do with it. A buddy of mine is like investing in like a ton of companies that are psychedelic companies. So this is the next wave, and I'm sort of collectively proud of us and very excited to see where this goes next.
Awesome. Thank you, David, and thank you to your buddy, and thank you to everyone. Absolutely. Just again, you know, we got some amazing people who are a part of this discussion here tonight, and all the amazing people listening to here. Like, you guys are a part of the revolution. Like, this is it. Like, this is the revolution. This is the revolution of consciousness right now. And I'll pass it to Rob in a second, and then we'll just get into closing meditation. You know, as we're doing this, again, we were talking about like intentions and everything like that. I think it's very, very powerful to even be able to show up to the psychedelic experiences with particular questions. And I think one question that can be incredibly powerful is the question of what is needed. And this is a question that, you know, I encourage us to be able to ask at any point within our day-to-day lives, within our meditation, but also to be able to, again, understand that like when you're working with psychedelics, it's literally like picking up a phone and talking right to the heart of Mother Earth itself, so to speak. You know, it's a direct line. And so if you can sit with that and be able to ask those questions, what is needed, see what comes through. And this is where, you know, I'd even invite fellow people here within the community. It'd be interesting if we could almost create like a list of questions that are good questions to ask on psychedelics. You know, do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, because again, understanding that when we're asking these questions, like the wisdom isn't just like purely just imagination and thoughts based on what we know. It's literally something kind of outside of ourselves. It's something, it's knowledge beyond ourselves, or at least perceives to be beyond ourselves, that we are here to receive, you know? So I think when we kind of open up that line of communication, there can be incredibly powerful wisdom that can come through. And again, you know, from my own personal experience, for me, like working with the psychedelics and stuff like that, the integration process is equally as important as part of the discussion. And this was even a comment in the YouTube chat. I said, all your base literally said integration and reflection is as important as the experience itself, is not more. And I know for me, I definitely feel that like, again, you know, the psychedelic experience, it stays with me. beyond the moment, because I make it into the part of the work that I do. It is a part of the motivation that continues to inspire me. That was one of the things, and I'll just say this here, and I want to be able to pass it over to Lacey too for some closing thoughts. When I did DMT for the first time, it inspired me so deeply. And the reason why is because up until that point, I was reading books and listening to other podcasts and listening to people talk about these spiritual experiences or higher dimensional realms and pulling back the veil and everything like that. And I was interested in it. I was fascinated by it. But once I actually worked with DMT, it no longer began, it shifted from being something that was just an idea to something that I knew was like a cosmic fact, like the idea that there was more to this reality than meets the eye. Like that simple idea, this simple idea that like, oh my goodness, we literally are in this ocean of energy. And that knowledge for me was incredibly inspiring, because I knew that underneath the surface of everything that was there, and it was also something that was inside of each and every single one of us. And it was something that I knew each and every single person would be able to find their way back to within their own unique path. And so that's where, for me, you know, even though that experience is something that I had back in 2009, it's been integrated into the work that I've been continuing to do for the past decade plus, with this kind of idea of kind of like, without me even explicitly telling people, hey, this is what I saw and this is what I think reality is, to be able to hold space, to be able to help guide them back to that wisdom through their own aha moments, through their own revelations and realizations, be it with psychedelics or otherwise. And so for me, that psychedelic experience really just kind of like gave me the inspiration where it's like, this isn't just theory, like this is like something tangible. This is a tangible aspect of this reality, that there's like this reality is so magical, like incredibly magical, and we are a part of that magic. And it just opened my heart and it expanded my mind, and I remember like being so excited about it. Like it was like I was given like the best birthday gift ever, and I've continued to carry this gift with me with like humility and respect, and again, to be able to kind of like integrate it into the work that I continue to do. And I remember even I was so excited after my psychedelic experience. I literally like by the time I got home, because I did it again, as context, I did it on my last day in Vancouver during a sunrise. So I literally did it during a sunrise, and then I went and like caught a plane and went home. And I remember like I told my parents about it. I'm like I have to tell you about this. Like this is so incredibly beautiful. Like I can't keep this to myself, and I want you to know. I want you to know how incredibly beautiful this reality is. And they're like, we know, Brendon, we know. And I'm just like, no, it's even more beautiful. Like I know when you look at a flower and you look at puppies and you look at me and you look at you see the beauty, but it is even more beautiful than we can even fathom, so to speak. And again, just that magic has continued to permeate throughout my day-to-day existence. And in the same way, I hope that by me sharing this, it is something where, you know, for others, I hope the experience is a positive, is an uplifting, is a nurturing one that continues to carry with you throughout the work that you continue to do. And for the mushrooms and the LSD and for the guides and for the energies to kind of like be there alongside of you, and for you to kind of like feel that support and to just kind of understand that like that energy that you're connecting with, it is you. Like it's not something separate from you. It literally is you. And the universe wants to wake up. Like it literally wants to wake up, and is waking up through our direct experience and through our art and through our conversations and through our space holding and through our creativity and through our compassion. So yeah, it's very, very exciting to be at this point where, again, you know, now we've had past podcasts, and you guys can even go back and find past podcasts where we were talking about psychedelics back in like 2013 and 2012. But now I feel like more and more of society is starting to really dive into this conversation. And that's the thing. And I'll just say here and pass it to Lacey. Once you kind of really start looking at this deeply, you realize that the psychedelic experience is so intimately related to all of the other like phenomena of this reality, like all the other things, like the UFO phenomena, like the parapsychology, the energy system, dreaming, life, death. It's all interrelated. It's a very, very powerful piece of the puzzle. So again, how can we continue to bring that and just kind of continue to integrate it into our bigger perception, our bigger paradigm that we are moving into? What happens when a society is based off of a deeper understanding of the innate magic that this reality is. So yeah, Lacey, moving into any closing thoughts, if there's anything else you want to share, wisdom for, you know, the baby psychonauts out there. And I shouldn't call you guys that. And even the term psychonaut, because I know students.
We're all students.
I do like the term psychonaut, and again, I know we use that a couple times in broadcast without full context. So again, psychonaut, like astronaut, is psychonaut because it's like the mind, the journeyer of the mind. So again, when you think of like again, kind of what we were saying, like, do what you can to kind of like prepare as that, in the same way an astronaut would prepare to go into outer space. How can you prepare to be able to go into these inner spaces and be able to show up for these journeys as, again, you know, like a journeyer and ambassador? It's something that, again, you know, it can be daunting, it can be scary, it can be a little bit of anxiety. I'm sure we all feel that, like, right? Like, don't you guys get that feeling where it's like you're gonna do psychedelics again, and you get that little feeling of anxiety, but that anxiety is kind of like mixed in with excitement because you're just like, can't, like, once we do this, there's no turning back. Like, you got to commit to it, you got to go to it. It's an adventure, and yeah, it's a beautiful one at that. Lacey, go ahead. Any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone that was in the podcast. David, is it Rob?
David and Rob, yeah, and Julia.
Julia, thank you so much for coming, and I'm happy that I got to share space with you guys. You guys seem like incredible people. Love to chat more about all sorts of things. Love to learn from you guys. So yeah, I hope to connect further. And with anyone who else is in the chat, anyone, find me, let's talk. I'm all about talking about astral projection and dreams, so let's talk, Rob. Like,
right, yeah.
You were saying some stuff, I was like, okay, we need to talk. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just
any closing thoughts for the people out there who are new to all this?
Okay, I would say yeah, just continue to trust your path and your journey. Don't rush anything, and just be gentle with yourself. That's just like my biggest thing, is that we are like our biggest critics, and we're so hard on ourselves constantly. And I know that's not totally related with psychedelics, but just from personal experience with working with it in a shadow kind of way, that just be gentle. And if you need support, Shift is a great community to come and ask for support. There's a lot of incredible, loving, and fully like heart open people that aren't going to judge you, or, you know, so that I'm just saying, like, that's an open invitation if you need support during your psychedelic experiences or otherwise. Yeah, so happy.
Have a good trip.
Have a good trip.
Yeah. Again, you know, whatever, life is a trip. Life is the psychedelic experience when you realize it.
So it really is. And you're waking up to that. You're waking up to the psychedelic nature of reality that we're living in every day. And David really made a good point saying about grounding it. And you can find at first that it's a little like rocky. You're like, oh, I don't know, like, how do I ground down into the human experience and bring this back for everyone to access, so it's accessible to everyone? Because some people might not fully, like you said, your parents were like, oh yeah, I get it, it's beautiful, and that's okay. You know, they're seeing things from their perspective, which is also very sacred and holy as well. So everyone's got their own timeline.
yeah honoring the collective paths that lead us up the mountain. So yeah, dropping
seeds, you know,
yeah,
hugging and supporting, and like, here.
yeah dropping seeds, dropping acid, whatever you want to do. So a bit of both. So
yeah,
there you go do some acid and make a garden while you're at it. So seriously,
lay in the garden,
or just lay in the garden,
eat some vegetables straight from the garden.
yeah if they give you permission to. Ask the vegetables before you eat them. So let's get into another level here. It's like the fruit's talking to me. So anyways, all right, well, the trees will talk to you, that's for sure. So Anyways, all right, we'll pass it over. Thank you, Lacey. For those of you looking to connect with Lacey, you can find Lacey on Instagram at the Paper Druid and on TikTok at Paper Druid. And again, show notes in YouTube. When you refresh this video after it ends, you'll find the links for everybody. And I posted into the top comment on YouTube. So yeah, please feel free to follow anybody that you heard on today's podcast. Send them a DM, send them a message, tell them how much you enjoyed listening to the podcast and hearing their thoughts. So. Awesome. Thank you, Lacey. All right. David, can I pass it to you? And just again, closing thoughts, and then we'll get into our final meditation here. So, David, when you're ready, go right ahead, dude.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you guys, everybody, for being here. This was awesome. I've learned so many things, and it feels like such a short amount of time, even within this. And this space particularly, it's really interesting to be able to take another look at certain psychedelic experiences and, mine new gold there. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said they stay with you for a long time. And if you're careful, you can always look back from, kind of a different state of consciousness, and there's still more to be had. And I wish that for everybody, and I can't wait to see how far and weird this whole thing goes for me and everybody else.
Oh yeah, it's going far and it's going weird. So and by weird I mean magical. So totally. All right, Rob, pass it over to you, dude. Thank you so much for being here. And any closing thoughts, words of wisdom for the people who have been.
Amazing. Okay, thank you guys. Seriously, I'm just super grateful to be in this space, to be able to discuss this openly, because a couple of years ago, I'm sure many people can relate. When you first start your spiritual journey, it's kind of awkward to talk about those kinds of experiences with people because you might get looked at crazy. Now I'm at a point where I don't care. Like, I'm expressing my truth. It is what it is. You can love me or hate me. It is what it is. But yeah, just super grateful. Love every single one of you. And Lacey, we'll definitely be talking about maybe some astral themes or anything like that, because I this past year I started every single day, every single morning. First, I did one. I started writing down my dreams to the point where I now feel that I'm all them, and super interesting. Yeah, again, super grateful for all of this. And yeah, I guess just as a recap for everything, so we're gonna if you have the intention to take psilocybin mushrooms or any medicinal tool, make sure you practice self-love. Let's see what else we got here. Make sure you set an intention, get in the right environment, and then lastly, just enjoy it. There's going to be times where you literally feel like you are about to die, but it's okay. Trust me, you will not die. There has been no one that's died from taking psilocybin mushrooms solely from that. Maybe the things that they did, that's a different story, but just solely from taking it, you will be okay. I think there's just that stigma that you're going to jump out of the building when it's really don't pay attention to that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And just again, really grateful for all this and all of you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. And side note, your mic was getting a little bit choppy there at the end. So yeah, just signal wise, I think, but the message came through, and absolutely, I think again, that message of self-love, like, yeah, like if you want to be able to like invest in getting the best trip possible, invest in yourself. If you're feeling a little bit anxious about it, take another month, wait 2 months, wait half a year. Don't be in a rush. Listen to it. You'll know when the time is right. So again, like, you have that free will, and when you really just kind of like honor the idea that there was a right time and a right place, you'll meet it there. So yeah, so thank you again, everybody, so much for being a part of this discussion. We're just going to get into a little bit of a closing meditation. My final closing thoughts, on addition to just what everyone said, again, keep doing your own research, keep having these types of conversations. If it's something that you feel called to do, be open to the idea, do it safely, do it smartly. If you have other people in your life who are also feeling called to this, do what you can to be able to help support them, hold space for each other, hold space for this collective journey, be able to show up to it as students, honor it, respect it. It really is this like psychedelic, it's psychedelics are psychedelic, duh. But it's a sacred tool that literally connects us with more of what it means to be a multidimensional being. It connects us with this higher dimensional energy, so to speak. It opens your eyes. And again, in a lot of ways, I think one of the things that psychedelics will teach you, and we didn't specifically talk about this too much, be willing to let go. You know, be willing to let go of control, be willing to let go of thoughts of who you perhaps thought you once were, be willing to let go of like certain ideas and perceptions about the world and things like that. That in itself can be a very powerful thing. Like someone's literally said that. They said, you know, like before you go into doing psychedelics, be ready to like to know that like everything that to possibly, not to say this is always the case, that possibly be ready to understand that everything you think you know isn't quite what it is, so to speak. Or again, just be very willing to be able to be open to seeing things in a new way, and yeah, just doing what we can to be able to integrate that knowledge and wisdom to be able to bring it back as something valuable for ourselves, for the collective, through art, through conversation, through personal love, through connection with the earth, through the work that we continue to show up and do. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the mushroom gods. Thank you to the LSD. Thank you to the psychedelics of all nature. Thank you to the psychedelics within us. Thank you to the breath. Thank you to the sun. Thank you to the earth. It's all there, man. And it's all us. It's all us, man. It's all us, and it's all there. Like that's the thing. Like that was always the takeaway from my psychedelics experience, is that what we experience on psychedelics, it's always there. It's always there. We are always in it right now. So even if you're not on psychedelics, you could literally take a moment here, and we're about to drop into our meditation, and we can literally just kind of like know that that energy is already right here. So let's do that. Let's move into our meditation, then we conclude this podcast. And I thank you everyone so much again for being a part of this, and for sticking around for tonight's conversation, and for taking this inspiration with you beyond it. So with that said, just inviting everybody to gently find a place where they can get nice and comfortable. This will literally just be for like 5 minutes. And so when you're ready, go ahead and gently close your eyes, straighten up your spine, open up your chest, relax your shoulders, roll your shoulders if you need to, and gently just begin to bring awareness to your breath. Gentle inhales and gentle exhales. And as you breathe here, just honoring the breath, and just feeling the psychedelic moment of this moment, the psychedelic nature of this moment. And again, literally, we didn't specifically talk about this today, but the word psychedelic, literally when translated, delos meaning God, psyche, mind. Psychedelic literally means being in like the presence of godness, so to speak. That's one way to kind of translate it. So psychedelics will lead us there. They will show us a place, but we will be able to understand that that place is always here. And we can show others how to be able to find this place simply within their own heart. Find the godness in every moment simply by being with your breath, simply by being in your heart. As we breathe here, let us return back to the visualization we started with, visualizing and imagining all of us sitting in a circle here, seeing us maybe out in the fields under a tree or in a yoga studio, and just looking around the faces as we sit here in this circle, ready to conclude this practice and ready to expand this circle outwards to explode like a million beautiful psychedelic fractals, and we'll carry this energy. The energy of this conversation will permeate through us. It will carry with us like seeds on the winds, and they will be planted within the hearts of the people we meet, and the conversations we have, and the art that we make, and the love that we share. So just take a moment here to be able to look at these faces, and put your hand on your chest, put your hand on your heart if you wish, and really just be able to acknowledge and honor all of these beautiful beautiful humans as ambassadors for this psychedelic wisdom, the psychedelic wisdom that is inherent to who we are as psychedelic beings. So just take a moment here within your heart. Speak words of compassion within your heart to the people here in this circle, the people here listening, to the collective as a whole. What do you want to say to them in this moment? Just take a moment here to be able to receive that gratitude as well. What does the collective have to say to you? What does the voice of the psychedelic nature inside your heart say to you in this moment? Just imagining now as we conclude this practice, what we're going to do is just visualize all of us standing up and just joining in a big group hug. And so imagine hugging as a group and just kind of standing either on the edge or inside the hug circle, and just add a little bit of a gentle sway to your body right now. Like physically just add a bit of a sway, a little bit of a sway to the left and the right, or back and forth. And this sway physically in your body right now is literally the sway of the circle, the hug. But this sway is like the sway of the cosmos, the sway of the rhythm, the same sway that you may feel when you're sitting on a field, coming up on mushrooms, and you're like, okay. Feel that in your heart right now. Slow things down as you increase your presence. Feel this love. Just be here for a few moments and just allow yourself to be able to hear any words of love spoken to your heart right now. Even be open to any words literally from like the psychedelic energy within your heart. What does it say to you in this moment? Even if it's just thank you, I see you, I love you. Beautiful. Express any words to the group, to the circle. You can give yourself a physical hug right now. You can wrap your arms around. You give yourself a little bit of a hug, a little bit of a squeeze. And then on the exhale, nice little bit of a sigh. Exhale, release. We'll do 2 more of those, and we'll conclude. Inhale. One more. Gently release. Imagine the hug kind of disbanding. Take a moment here. Just imagine giving individual hugs to the other members of the community. So feel free to visualize going up and thanking Rob, thanking Julia, thanking David, thanking Lacey, thanking myself, thanking all the people who are here, part of this amazing community of shifters, of light guardians, of psychonauts. Beautiful. And holding this energy within your heart may continue to carry with you beyond this moment. And slowly from here, taking a screenshot of this moment, and you can return to it any moment, any time within your imagination, gently bringing your awareness back to your physical body as you slowly open your eyes, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, and return your awareness to the space around you. Beautiful. Feeling floaty. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, you know, like the psychedelic experience, again, you know, the mushrooms, the LSD, whatever it is, like it takes us to a place, but then it also gives us the opportunity to be able to create a path back to it and to show others how to be able to find that path back to it. And again, I think that path is literally one that we're continuing to discover through meditation, through optimizing our health, through breath work, through sleep, through dreams, through gratitude. So beautiful. The psychedelic experience in me sees and honors the psychedelic experience in you. It is always with you. It is already here. It is right now. Go into a forest, sit with the trees, and just feel it. It is right there. So beautiful. Awesome. It is you. Wonderful. All right, team. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Again, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with your friends. Like this video on YouTube. Leave some comments afterwards. If you want to be able to join on air for future podcasts, please feel free to check out the Patreon to learn more about becoming a leading member, where you get access to our private community team space. Or maybe you want to join on the Patreon, even just to be able to show your support and be able to help continue the ongoing work that goes into this project. And again, please feel free to connect with all the creators that you've heard on tonight's podcast to check out more of what they're doing. And please feel free to join our team chat as well, where you can join in and continue the conversation that we do. And we will be having another team podcast next Thursday, 8 p.m. EST. Stay tuned. The topic for that is released on Monday, and you can also join in with our communities Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for our global team meditations that we do on the regular, which is a great way to be able to practice connecting with our breath, which is led by fellow leading members in the community. And you can find the links for that through our team chat, which is a Discord server. So that's in the info below on YouTube. Make sure you're connected there. And yeah, thank you everyone again. Please feel free to leave plenty of love and gratitude in the comments on YouTube. And with that said, I think we're about ready to wrap this up. So thank you so much, everyone, and stay tuned for part 2, which will happen at some point in the future. We'll see where it goes. So all right, with that said, for everybody here, David, Rob, please feel free to gently unmute your microphones as we send some love and make some noise and say goodnight to all the amazing people who are tuned in for today's discussion. So thank you, everyone. We love you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. All right, keep it shifty. We'll see you guys in the future. Peace, love, and wholeness. Beautiful. Special thank you to Danny Leonardo, whose music is featured at the beginning and end of this podcast. Be sure to check out more of Danny's work in the YouTube info below. Thank you, Danny.